Holy shit,
Hello,
nailed it, man.
everybody. Actually, it worked. Finally. Welcome to the live stream, everybody. We actually got the intro right for the first time ever. Had the 30-second countdown, did the little branded sting and stuff, and yeah, actually worked. Bloody hell. I'm actually proud of myself. Welcome. I am Jack. You probably know me from the Sequelisers podcast, as well as my inevitable, indomitable, incomparable co-host, Mr. Matthew Stockton.
Hello, friends. You right, Tim?
Joining us live, of course,
Tim?
are the patrons.
Tim?
But not joining us live
Yes.
is one Mr. Tim Matum. I'm sorry, Tim stands. Unfortunately, our dear third Sequelizer is not feeling well today. Hit with unfortunate migraines and stuff, something I can certainly relate to. So, yeah, unfortunately, no Tim on this live stream. But we'll be continuing nonetheless. We'll be doing our little Q&A section at the beginning and general chat, and then we'll go on to our director showdown, which we've teased for all you lovely patrons and for those of you watching later on YouTube as well. All the usual stuff. Don't worry, basically. We've already got a couple of people straight away. Andy Steen. Hello, Andy. How are you? Loving the John Scarrett style avatar there, the Terminator avatar. Loving it. Josh Vandersloos, who you may know from our executive producers as well, often gets a shout on the show, both of those guys. Oh, and Andy, appreciating the retry shirt. Thank you very much. See, there you go. And then sit around.
Oh, wow, I didn't see the back before. That's cool.
There you go. It's guys from RKG. It's yeah, really good podcast and YouTube channel I appreciate, and they do lots of Dark Souls and Soulsborne Let's Plays and stuff that are hilarious. Hence the retry. That is their series where they play through Soulsborne stuff. And they're fantastic. So yeah, got a t-shirt. Andy claims to have already worked out who the director is. Well. Don't spoil it for anyone yet, Andy. We will get to that later on. Don't you worry. But first, Matt, how are you? I know you've been busy. You've actually been resuming some filming on your web series. Is that right? You've been a busy filmmaking boy for the first time in 18 months. Feels like.
Yeah. No, yeah, I've been doing a lot, to be honest. To answer your question initially, how am I? Sore, Jack. I'm sore. I'm uncomfortable.
Sore.
I mean, yeah, I suffer from sciatica every now and again, which, for those who don't know, it's like a nerve pinch in the back of your spine. It's a very common thing you get the taller you are and the older you are. And I'm relatively tall and relatively old. And yeah, this basically means I got it first when I was in mid-2017, and we thought, oh God, what is this? What is this horrible thing? And it's a crippling pain that runs down your thing. You're very difficult to walk, etc., and so on and so forth. And it flares up every now and again. And so this happened. We were doing the Series 8 finale record on Friday. And that was a great episode. We're really happy with it, really proud of it. But it was also a very, very, very long session.
It's an epic session, to say the least. It's our longest recording session we've ever done for a single episode. I know we say that every time, but it is.
Yeah. It might be that it might keep that record for quite some time. I think it'd be hard to think of a franchise that we have that many opinions about, but we'll save that for later. Point is that kind of laid me a little bit low. We did filming on Saturday morning, and kind of struggled through a bit of rest of Saturday, and obviously today's been kind of a write-off, but it's been fine. So yes, the filmmaking side of things. For anyone who doesn't know, I know we mentioned on the show quite a lot, but in addition to reviewing films and stuff, I make a lot of stuff, and I have a web series that we've been shooting since 2016, 2017, and it's not on hiatus, but it's very much on hold until I can get the rest of it shot, and that requires certain scenes with a lot of people. We filmed some really complex stuff, which I'll get into in a second, and there's stuff I need to get in South Korea, stuff I need to get in Japan.
Because you had planned to go to South Korea before the pandemic, right?
I did, yeah. And I have to go there to get it.
You going to the Web Awards. You've award-winning director, and
I was supposed to be there to get my award of best director.
It was for best director. You've won best comedy series.
That's right.
So award-winning in Korea for whatever reason, because they have good taste. Clearly,
Koreans love it, and That'll
We'll
come
be
up
talking
later.
about some Korean stuff later on. There's a
Yeah,
little thing.
I genuinely. It sounds silly to say this, but if somebody like your mum says, "Oh, you're in a band. I really like your songs. They're nice." It's like, "Thanks, mum. It means a lot."
I didn't even
Fucking
get
hell.
that. I was in a band. My mum was like, not for me.
Not for me. But when you know somebody who's like, "Oh no, I appreciate the type of music you're making, and I understand what goes into it, and I really like it," you're like, "Yes, a vindication." It shouldn't be validation from yourself, but sometimes it's nice to be validated by other people. And I
Why else would we
really,
put ourselves out on YouTube and podcast platforms?
this
We
is
need
true.
validation.
Love us, please.
Exactly.
We got back to filming for a lot of things, and I said to the cast and crew, we're going to hit the ground running hard. I'm going to be bugging people all the time to make up lost time here. I intend to effectively Lord of the Rings this shit. I'm going to be filming Series 4, Series 5, Series 6, and the spin-off back to back. That's about 30 episodes. I mean, it's like, web series. It's like 8-minute long each. However, having said that, this won't mean anything because it's all cryptic hieroglyphic shit. But basically, that's every shooting day that I have left. It's not that many for the amount of stuff because I already filmed so much stuff. There are people who don't live in this country anymore who I've shot footage of that you won't see for another 2 years that we shot 3 years ago. It's a real mess to try and get your head around, but it's good and it's fun. We did a lot of shooting days recently. We did stuff with Ashens and various others, and we did things with one of the cast who is a pilot, so I went in a plane, flew around. It was very, very cool.
That
and it's
was
nice
cool.
to come out of lockdown and just be able to have that experience in general, let alone back to filming. So yeah, I've been doing a lot of stuff, a lot of coordinating. What would have been a very difficult shoot, i.e. the airfield stuff, is actually quite straightforward because it's me and one actor. Whereas there's a scene with Jack Chambers.
Hello, that's me.
Jack and 2 other actors, one of whom has just had a baby, and they'll be filming indoors. And it's like the logistics of trying to work that out in sort of not post-COVID, but coming out of COVID times is actually really, really tricky. Trying to work the logistics of that is a nuisance. But that shouldn't be as complicated, but it is. It's just conversation stuff. Anyway, but we'll get through that. I'm enjoying it a lot. We'll have a lot more footage, and this is way, way off in the distance. In Norwich, there will be a convention in January 2022 called the One Life Left convention with our friends One Life Left, who's a gaming cafe.
OLL Live.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And lots of people will be there. There'll be Octavius King, Ashens will be there, tons of video game stuff. We'll have a table and we'll have our own panel, and we'll be debuting exclusive clips and footage and stuff and being interviewed and things. So in a weird way, if you're in Norwich in January, you can get tickets and you can come down and say hello and stuff. It's a weird experience because we would do this obviously, previously in London at MCM and things.
Chat for all the viewers in there. It's ollgames.co.uk.
Thank you,
can go there and see OLL 22, the video game convention. About 200 days away. That's a weird thing to say. And
it's very well timed. Like January, it's like, things will hopefully be so much more solid then, so much more comfortable, and it'll be a nice weekend, and a lot of the cast will be there. Jack and Tim will probably be there, probably.
Yeah, definitely.
Get on stage, have some questions and things. So it's also a mini Sequelisers thing technically.
Yep.
So yeah, it'll be fun.
Yeah. We'll have Ashens. There's Did You Know Gaming. There's Last Level Games. Nostalgia Nerd's going to be there. You mentioned Octavius King. Our friends over at the Super 8-Bit Power Hour are going to be there. The guys that Bring Back Retro. Loads of great exhibitors and traders and all this kind of stuff. There's going to be panels. There's going to be shops. There's going to be come and see us at the table and have a chat with us and all that kind of stuff. I will certainly be lurking in the Super Happy Kill Time Cheese Mint booth and hanging out with those guys. I'll obviously go and see our pals as well. Go and see Stuart and all the guys in the Super 8-Bit as well. I've done a few shows with the Super 8-Bit guys before, the gaming conventions locally and stuff like that. And it's a lot of fun, just kind of chatting with people, playing video games with people, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, lots of fun. If you do fancy coming to Norwich in January of 2022, please do come and say hello. I know some listeners are local, but some listeners are a bit further away, and we have been threatening to do like a sequel con for a while now and do our own convention, but
This is
Not
trial
quite
running
sure.
it.
We're not quite sure. Not quite ready there yet, but we do plan to do a live show at some point when we're able to safely get everybody back in and once we're all vaccinated and stuff.
Yes.
You're double vaccinated, Matt. I'm single vaccinated. I will be by the time of my birthday. Hopefully, is my a few days before my 31st birthday is my second vax, so I should be all sorted by the end of this year. Fingers crossed. Basically, everyone will be sorted in the UK by the end of this year, and then by January, we'll be double vaccinated. We'll be, a lot freer, a lot able to go out and see more people and shake hands and kiss babies and all that kind of stuff. Do you not kiss babies? Is that not normal?
It's not. I'm asked of me very often, but that's because
right.
Tickles the baby. The baby just frowns at you.
Yeah, we have very different audiences, Matt. You and I. There's very different requests.
Yeah. So everything's been good. Getting back to the cinema, I've got tickets booked to see like Black Widow and stuff. For the patron people, obviously it goes out live onto goes out live. Wrong phrase. Sorry. It goes out afterward onto YouTube for everybody else, and that's all good. But we have done something. We've done something in the outtakes for.
Oh yeah.
Which episode was it exactly? I've kind of forgotten already. It was a big movie, blockbuster kind of showdown kind of thing. I should have prepared.
I can't remember.
We make so much content, guys. We lose track of everything. But basically, Tim had a draft going on. If we could like gauge how the summer would look for what's the word? For UK release and things like that, and reviews, and how this, things get put out there. We did a little.
It was the Born Legacy outtakes, by the way.
Born Legacy.
So it is already available for patrons.
Yes. So if you're watching this on YouTube, it's a cool thing. We'll probably share it closer to the time when it comes out and things like that. But it was a very cool idea, and I'm looking forward to that. So as I say, just because cinema's starting to open up again, and me starting to go back to the cinema and things, it's exciting. It's fun. I haven't seen Fast 9 yet.
I've heard very mixed things.
My experience will be like every Fast film. I'm like, cool. I have almost zero. I have zero commitment or concern about where the franchise goes.
True.
I literally attend purely for the spectacle, knowing full well that I'll just come out and say, "Yeah, that was an experience.
That was a big
not so good or bad
madness." Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not expecting to get anything out of it, and that's sort of hollow. But I feel the franchise is kind of hollow, if I'm honest.
Have you seen Hobbs and Shaw? Like that is the franchise to the extreme. I think that is the not the hollowness, but the like it's just an action movie. All the like family bullshit that's with Vin Diesel and is like the theme and the heart of the franchise is ignored because we've just got The Rock and Statham and this is all action all the time kind of thing.
I don't know. It ends on an island with all of The Rock's family. Sure, that's
including WWE Universal Champion Roman Reigns because. He's his actual cousin in real life.
That's crazy.
Because he's Samoan.
Yeah, so basically things are good. It's just getting there. Getting there is a nice slow answer. What about you, Jack? You've got some exciting, life news. I don't know if you're going to share or not, but you're changing jobs. That's good.
Oh yeah, I've got a new job. Yeah. As of tomorrow. So recording this obviously going live on Sunday, the 27th of June, 2021. Tomorrow, the 28th, I start my new job, and it will give me sort of more normal working hours. It's more of a 9-to-5 kind of thing, which allows us to do a bit more from the Sequelizer side of things, which is nice, and spend a bit more time with my partner, which is gonna be lovely. So yeah, Emma and I get to have a bit more time together. I'm not working until like 7 in the evening and stuff, and having to either delay recordings or compromise on a bunch of other stuff. And yes, Andy, you have correctly guessed. I'm the new health secretary of the UK. How did you guess?
Jack, massive Tory.
Yeah. Well known, as well documented on this show and our live streams. I'm a massive Tory. And then everybody's going to cut that audio clip and just reuse that to
scandalous slanderer.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, as some of you guys know, I work in digital marketing, and I'm going to be working with I previously worked with one agency here locally in Norfolk, and I'm now moving on to another agency. And there's some podcast production side of things. So you may hear me crop up or at least be producing. I don't know. I haven't negotiated whether I'm on mic yet or not, but I will be certainly help editing and producing a podcast in my day job as well. So that's nice to actually use my...
Which is the dream. Pay to use the skills.
The Sequelizer skills in the day job, which is lovely.
Getting angry about Zack Snyder.
Yeah, I do.
It's
Well,
not part of it.
yeah, I did meet the guys from my new job earlier this week, and it was kind of, we did have those kind of conversations, and we seem similarly aligned. Thank God, I'm not going to be having huge arguments about Zack Snyder movies with too many people. Hopefully,
So
fingers
far,
crossed. Yeah, I did have to explain how Sequelisers works to them as well, and they were like, "That sounds really cool," and I was like, "Okay, good, yeah, there we
Thank
go."
you. You're wrong. You're right.
Yeah.
I bought 2 things recently, Jack.
Were they safe for work, Matthew?
No.
Okay.
Oh, safe for work. I was like, can you safe for work? I was like, no, don't do work.
Are they
Yeah,
SFW, not NSFW?
Yeah, entirely. I'm not going to talk about putting things inside people.
Your
No,
most recent hentai Blu-ray collection.
No, it is Blu-rays though. And the reason I bring it up is
I was
because
surprised.
I think I mentioned this in the Discord because I had a conversation with my wife about this. It's not a bad thing per se. It's just one of those things that I've sort of taken stock because I invest a lot in, not as much as some people we know. Executive producer John Firth Clark. That man collects Blu-rays, not to the extent that I do, but he collects some very specific niche ones that were like,
he has some real fucking garbage in his collection, and then he has some absolute gems.
That's very true.
It's a bizarre mix for old JFC.
Mm-hmm. But I picked up
the same thing. To
be fair, I picked up 2 box sets, and they were not light purchases. So the first one is the Wong Kar-wai Criterion Collection. Actually, both the Criterion Collections. Why are they fucking expensive? The Wong Kar-wai box set, which is 7 movies, which are all fantastic. Wong Kar-wai is one of those directors who is probably going to make his way onto this director showdown at some point. He is an absolute,
definitely,
an absolute masterclass director. And it's frustrating because I was saying to Stuart Ashton the other day that I don't think these films individually have been available on Blu-ray in the United Kingdom, which was a frustration. Like with the big Godzilla Criterion Collection, it's like £150, and you're like,
"But you have that big gorgeous pink book, hardback kind of thing."
Yeah, it's crazy. I had to have custom-made regular DVD box set covers, slipcase sort of sleeves printed for it, so I could have it in my collection quite neatly and have the book upstairs within my library with books. Also because again the CDs at the card cases. So yeah, point is that you can't buy Godzilla, the original 1954 film, individually on Blu-ray in the United Kingdom. You have to buy £150 worth of these films. And you're like, God,
Christ,
damn it! Oh, except for some reason, King Kong versus Godzilla. That one's fine,
of course.
But yeah, so
did they re-release that for Godzilla versus Kong?
No, this one's been out for a while. I don't know why. I have no idea why. I think it's because the licensing rights are shared or something like that. But
they try. I reckon that is that classic thing where they tried to release it so people bought it by accident, kind of thing. Like when Xbox One sales shot up when the Xbox Series X and Series S, the Xbox X and the Xbox One S, the sales shot up like 1,200%. You're like, this is people who either don't know what they're doing or like mums and grandparents being like, I bought you the new Xbox. It's coming tomorrow. It doesn't come out for another 3 months, mum. You bought the wrong one. Oh, no.
Oh, that was a bit cheaper. £250. That was a bargain. Yeah, I bet you fucking did.
Yeah.
So the Godzilla box set, beautiful, amazing. I love the films on there. So it was a very natural purchase for me. The Wong Kar-wai box set, I was going to get all the films anyway. It's just that you have to get them all in one go. And it was released, I think, about a month ago. And I went to HMV, which is a chain here in the United Kingdom. And I went on day of release down there and said, hello. And it's, it's got the thing, they're not going to just put it on the shelf. Of course, because it's a very awkward box. And they said, please ask at the counter. And I said, hello. Mask, screen, mask. Hello, can I have the Wong Kar-wai box set, the Blu-ray one, please? The what?
There we go.
But to be fair,
it's when you want to have like the photo on your phone and you hold your phone and be like, this one, please. Yeah. Point to the thing.
Admittedly,
like an irritating Britishman on holiday when you're just like,
point at the menu.
I want the thing, the cheesy one.
This one,
the Korean director.
So I basically said again, and the lady next to me said, "Oh no, it's that one there." I said, "Oh, okay, great." And she said, "Yeah, oh, okay. Oh, that's very nice. I said, yes. And she said, £150. And I said,
Mm.
yeah. And she said, the other person at the counter said, you're probably quite smart to get this. And I said, oh, okay. I said, we only have one. There are no more at the warehouse available to get. And the manager said, if it's not there, if it's still there on Wednesday, i.e., 2 days later, he's going to have it. And I said, he's not now. And she said, I'm going to relish telling him that. Like, good.
Mm.
But it's again, since then, I don't think it's in stock on Amazon, things like that. They're a very limited run of them. And it's like, nerds like me are going to pick it up. And everything on there is just an amazing release. It's very, very, very niche.
But those of you who probably maybe don't know Wong Kar-wai's work, he's a fantastic, like, pivotal, important director in Hong Kong cinema and through the history of Hong Kong cinema of the last sort of like 40 years or so. he's been going longer than he lets on, and kind of like in the 90s is when he really started to sort of break through and come out of his kind of like, it started in the late 80s and into the 90s, stuff like Chungking Express, I think, is the one that a few people may have seen. And his most recent film, I think, is a literal masterpiece, is The Grandmaster, which I absolutely adore that film. And I've talked about it on the show before, maybe on a live stream, I can't remember. But I absolutely love The Grandmaster. And some of the fights and that are just jaw-dropping and amazing. And it's a version of the Ip Man story, which is the Wing Chun Grandmaster who trained Bruce Lee. And you may know the Ip Man series. There's now 4 or 5 films in that series. They're really good as well. But the Grandmaster is its own thing and is absolutely fantastic in its own right as well.
Certain martial arts fans don't like it as much because it puts obviously the actual martial arts fighting itself is really well executed, but the presentation of how it's shot is, shall we say, more beautiful than most of the previous iterations of this kind of thing. So
it's almost, I mean, it's not wuxia, but you can see the influences there of this. Like you said, there's more. When you think of like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, which we've talked about on the show before, you think of that really beautifully shot, intricate camera angles and particular set design and all this kind of stuff. And a lot of as I said, I love the Ip Man films as well. And I think what Grandmaster does is makes it feel a bit more fantastical and a bit more kind of, a bit more of like a legendary air to it, if that makes sense, rather than the Ip Man ones start off, I was going to say realistic, but they get pretty silly. But there's kind of the dynamic there. And Tony Leung is fantastic as Ip Man himself. Shang-Chi is, as we know from Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, fantastic. We mentioned her on the episode we did as well. Yeah, great cast. I love The Grandmaster. I think it's very underrated. And Wong Kar-wai. What would you say is your favourite Wong Kar-wai film, Matt? I'm putting you on the spot here.
In the Mood for Love.
Yeah,
In the Mood for Love is easily the best one.
Like year 2000, I think. Again, Tony Leung, fantastic.
Yes, entirely. Fallen Angels is also really fun because it's very 90s, but in a really in a way that you think it feels. How can I put this? It feels like a 2005 film shot in the mid 90s. In how forward thinking it was and how ahead of its time it was, etc. If you would say it was part of like the Korean New Wave, you'd be like, yeah, that makes sense. It's like, no, it's not. It's this amazing Hong Kong movie from the 90s. Very niche, shot in a really invasive kind of way. But yeah, Wong Kar-wai stuff, brilliant. But again, me telling you this is a problem because if you think, oh wow, well, I'd love to see these films on Blu-ray.
I'm gonna go and check this out.
Yeah, you know how to do that now
on Netflix. Like, Good luck with that.
It's a bastard. So that was one box that I bought, and there's again, bang, huge dent to my bank account. Then at the end of the month, now, okay, caveat sentence for you here. I appreciate and understand and acknowledge Amazon and its practices are dog shit. It is a very big what's the word for here? Not necessary evil. I don't agree with that at all. But it's always the moment of like, but as a corporate, someone who exists in capitalism, I want to buy things, and they happen to have a cheap version, and it's hard because you want to support, other people, and so I try to do as much as I can with other bits.
Yeah.
However, Prime Day, now that's usually a joke for me. I think Prime Day is actual dog shit. But they had a box set, and I was like, oh fuck, it's £150 Criterion Collection box set again. And they knocked it down to £100, and I was like, I can't not get this. So I did. So mea culpa for that shit. So the set in question was the Zatoichi, was a Toichi collection. Shintaro Katsu, who plays this character, and I should point out, this is 25 samurai films that are all really cool. There's one which is Zatoichi meets, or Masashi version. I'm not sure what it is now. I think it's meets. Yeah, Zatoichi meets Yojimbo, and it's got Toshiro Mifune. It's one of those classic crossover kind of things.
Man, nice.
And again, it's like, oh wow, Zatoichi. And there's one they did in like the early 2000s with Beat Takeshi.
Yeah,
Takeshi Kitano, and that's a great fun one as well. And I have that on Blu-ray as well.
I really like that film.
Yeah, it's really
one of my parents' favorite films. They absolutely love
that particular one. Nice. I should point out that the story is very simple. It's a wandering samurai who is blind, but he's like stupidly skilled, and it's very much like 60s, 70s. And they did these things in like such quick succession. Like there's one point where there's like, I think it might be maybe the early 70s, maybe. Doesn't matter too much, but the point is that in 64, early 60s. In 64, they did 4 of these movies. They released 4. I mean, you think about like Marvel being like, oh god, 4 Marvel films in the year.
You've got Zatoichi and the Chest of Gold, Zatoichi's Flashing Sword, Fight, Zatoichi Fight, and Adventures of Zatoichi, all in the same year.
And and they're not all masterpieces.
There's like 3 in 1965, 2 in 1966, 3 in 1967, etc., 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 etc.
Yeah,
and then kind of like a, for a better phrase, like a rebooty kind of thing. That you said the modern version in 2003.
And again, I think they're really fun films. And as has been pointed out in the chat, £4 per film is insane.
It's great value.
Yeah, but equally, it's a sense of, if you like the idea of that, guess what you have to do? You have to find 150 quid. So basically what I'm trying to say is I kind of bought maybe close to £300 worth of Blu-rays on 2 box sets, which isn't unusual per se, but it is not normal. Most people wouldn't do that. That's like a one really expensive Christmas present that you get eventually kind of thing. But I value the physical media, and I've actually done an article for this for Film East if you want to check it out, which is about the idea of the rise of streaming media and the lack of appreciation, shall we say, for physical media, and more the idea that while things change and there's a disposable nature to it all, etc., etc., etc. I'm not saying everyone should be like me, because just over my shoulder there is a ton of little CD cases, and inside is 3,000 DVDs, because the storage capacity, the way you have to actually store these things, is a nightmare. It's a real logistical problem just figuring out where everything is going to go. But I own it. I own these things. They're mine. I can watch them whenever I want. And people say, "Oh, it's a defunct media. It's a defunct thing." It's like, yeah, okay, if you've got VHS, sure, but my DVDs and Blu-rays the format hasn't evolved other than streaming format. And I was talking again, I keep saying I'm talking to Stuart because I had a big conversation with Stuart Ashton the other day, and we're talking about how he watched.
Filmmakers, it makes sense.
Yeah, we're talking about how watching Jurassic Park on Blu-ray, and I thought, you know what, I'm not going to go to the shelf and put on the actual disc. I'm too lazy to turn around and put the disc in. I'll just put it on Netflix, and I put it on. I thought, this looks quite grainy as shit, but this is the highest quality version they have. I don't understand. My internet's great, so I don't understand. Put my Blu-ray in. It's better. It's significantly better. I'm like, oh, for God's sake. Not always the case, and some things I don't need.
To your video
thank you.
Article in the chat, by the way.
Very kind. Feel free to go read it if you like.
There you go.
I'm not, again, it's not
filmnation.com/video on demand. Go straight there. Go check it out. Lovely stuff.
And it's not me saying you should go out and buy Blu-rays yourself. It's me saying that there will always be a niche, and they know that now. They know what to market it as. There's no such real thing as like, it used to be that you get the single edition DVD and the double disc edition for like special edition, collector's edition, that kind of stuff. Less so now. You'll just get the Blu-ray is going to be the one that the collectors are going to buy. the one that you see that maybe streamed on Sky or Now TV or Netflix or whatever, that's for a couple of months is the one that people are going to watch. And again, it comes down to streaming media is fantastic. It's accessible. It's so good to be able to pay £7 or £8 and have access to so much stuff. But if you want to watch something specific, like, oh, I'm really in the mood for this, then you have to keep constantly paying for that content over and over and over and over and over.
Yeah,
and it's not the sense of like, I can't find it. Okay, I'm going to go to Amazon, rent it for £3.50 or whatever.
The same thing's happening in video games, and I know I always spin things into video games because
you're right to.
I know the video game industry a bit better than I know the film industry in general. It's my background and stuff, but Nintendo are particularly egregious for this. That you will buy the same Mario or Zelda game on every different platform over and over and over again. And granted, Sony and Microsoft and Atari and Sega are pretty guilty of it these days as well. But I feel like Nintendo kind of set the bar for that kind of stuff, where they would re-release, hey, you want to play Mario 3? Like one of the best platformers of all time? Play it on your Wii. It's like, great, through the Nintendo online Wii store. Like, brilliant. We've shut down the Wii store. Play it on your Wii U. You must pay us $40. It's like, I own that on the last console, and I also own it on the original Super Nintendo. So why am I like? I get like you can't play your Super Nintendo games on a fucking Wii. It's 20 years later. It's 30 years later. It makes sense. But going from Wii to Wii U, and then being like, it's on the online store, but you can't play it now. It's like, okay, great. And then, oh, we've remastered it in a collection that is available for 6 months. What are you doing, Nintendo? It's weird. Like, yeah, it's a Mario All-Stars collection that we stopped selling in March. Like, what do you mean you stopped selling? I know you're creating this like fake demand thing by making it seem like a limited release, but it's a digitally released video game. You can release it whenever you want. Like, it doesn't matter. There's no like, and there's and there's a big thing about sort of like preservation, because there was rumors that Sony were going to be shutting down the PlayStation 3 and Vita stores. So
that's right.
Anything you haven't downloaded or bought from those stores already, you would never be able to buy again. And there are certain digital download games and stuff that are only available on those platforms, and they would essentially be lost to time if no one else can access it. And if you don't own a PS Vita with this thing downloaded on this date, then you can never download it again, and it's gone forever. Even though you paid for it, and even though there's a big argument there for like archiving and keeping, maintaining the history of cinema and video games and entertainment pieces and stuff. When you're moving into a digital space, it's a really interesting thing. And talking about the costs of maintaining servers and all this kind of stuff. And people think, oh, but it's so much more like environmentally friendly when you get rid of all the plastic packaging and stuff. Like, do you know how expensive it is to run a bank of servers 24/7? Like, it can get really, really expensive. And if you're maintaining it for like 10 people that still play the PlayStation Vita, I am a diehard Vita fan, by the way. I own one myself. But yeah, if you're maintaining this huge bank of servers just to keep like 10 people happy, it's not cost effective. It makes no sense. And at the end of the day, they're corporations. They got to make money, and they can't just, pour money into other things and get away with it. But
it is a classic thing. I remember growing up as a kid and watching Dad's Army on the BBC. So it's an old British comedy my father used to like. Well, still like probably. And I remember very distinctly, it was like Series 1, Series 3, Series 4. It's like, what happened? It's like, oh, back in the day, BBC didn't really seem to appreciate what reruns might be. So they just, for practical reasons, taped over everything. So there are so many lost huge franchises. And at the time, it didn't make a difference. Nobody cared. But it's also like, why did you do that? It's like, well, because we showed it already.
There's a famous example here from Andy in the chat as well.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
It's the human nature to wipe things. They're recorded over old Doctor Who episodes and moon landing tapings. It's like, famously, a bunch of the classic Doctor Who stuff was lost for decades. Yeah. And some people are rediscovering it now. Like, oh, turns out my uncle was a cameraman and he happened to store it in his attic. Even though he wasn't supposed to, he kept some like the negatives and stuff. So like, wait, so we can restore this from your uncle's attic? Like, yeah, I mean, sure, give it a go. Stick it in a projector and see what happens. Like, oh my God, that's amazing. all this
Yeah,
weird stuff that was just lost to time.
I'm always. Oh, I remember seeing the re-release of the effectively special edition of Metropolis, the 1920s film, which I really love. And I remember like, oh, we found it in Argentina. There's like this old version with like 20 minutes of footage. Like, what? It's like, yeah, there's tons of story stuff that we didn't know existed because we've only been going off prints that we had. Because again, it was a case of burning off some. I mean, the whole story of Hugo, the Martin Scorsese film, which we talked about previous month's stream, is the idea of preservation. Like, oh, it was just cheaper to just burn up the film celluloid to make heels for women's shoes or whatever it was. And just the notion of like you are, and it comes down to, as Jack said about the video games, it's art preservation. You have a responsibility, and obviously not everything needs to be preserved, but it's as another key example. Let's take YouTube, where this is being hosted at present. YouTube stores so much stuff, and creatives like myself or whoever don't always keep backups of everything. And for obviously we do, because we create like lots of a podcast is quite easy to store. We have a lot of it, and we have as a filmmaker,
physical storage and cloud storage backups of all of our episodes for the record.
That's all the storage.
You can see Matt's right there, and we've got Google Drive that we pay for that backs everything up as well. So
yes,
we've got the original audio files that are our 3 recordings. We've got the intro. We've got that kind of stuff as well.
Yeah.
And then the final mixed files I downloaded and stored as well. I keep a personal record on one of my hard drives. We've got the official Sequelisers hard drive, as Matt said. It's over his shoulder just there. And we make sure it's all kind of archived and stuff. Because I've encountered this before. Turns out my old comics podcast, Into Comics, just doesn't exist anymore.
That's insane.
So I don't pay for the SoundCloud thing anymore. So SoundCloud restricts you to like a certain amount of episodes per account if you don't have a paid for account.
I mean, I get it, but
and eventually that expired at some point. So, if, say, for example, you can't have more than 50 recordings on a free account or whatever it is, then everything outside of 50. And we recorded like 200 episodes, so 150 episodes are just gone. And there's the last 50 episodes available, and that's it, basically, I think. Or something along those lines. There is some limit. And a friend of mine who is another comics podcaster, and I met through him listening to Into Comics, he was like, hey, man, I'm just going through and listening to old episodes and stuff. Do you know where episode 65 is? I was like, what do you mean? Where is it? He's like, I can't find it anywhere. Whenever I click on the link on the website, it doesn't go to anything. I was like, I mean, it was like 2 laptops ago. It was like 7 or 8 years ago. So I have no fucking idea. It might be on one of my physical hard drives somewhere, but I have no idea. I'd have to dig that out of one of my drawers. Who knows? And he was like, well, it might be gone then. I was like, it might be gone. That's so weird that these episodes just anything that are published on the internet. You think that, the internet, everybody says anything that goes on the internet is forever. The internet's forever. Don't post anything on the internet you don't want there to be there forever, kind of thing. Except not necessarily true if you let certain subscriptions expire.
well, I mean, for us, as we produce a lot of podcast content weekly and all the Patreon stuff. So, there's a lot of it, but we have it stored because it's not big files. For filmmakers, I mean, again, we make a lot of things with Cheesemint, but not to the degree of like, we're not YouTubers. We're making films and web series stuff. So we have that stored. But having said that, if you are a really big, successful YouTuber who's posting, let's face it, on a daily basis, if not multiple videos on a daily basis, and all kinds of stuff constantly, there's no way you're storing all of that because you're filming in 4K and all that sort of things. You're just saying, hey, everybody, like and subscribe. It's just me in my living room.
I know Chris Broad from Abroad in Japan, the fantastic YouTuber, he talks about storage issues a lot because he's been filming in 4K and filming in 8K recently alongside Tokyo Lens, another YouTuber in Japan who also does that kind of thing. And they're basically having like a resolution off. Where it's like, well, I got a 4K camera. Well, I've got an 8K camera. And teasing each other because YouTube peaks out at 4K and is like, cool, you've got an 8K camera. You can't upload 8K though, so you're just wasting storage. And he's like,
but 12K or something ridiculous.
And then he got 12K and he was like, fuck you.
Yeah.
And but the files for those, the file size for those files is absolutely insane. And I remember having my mind blown by Gavin from Slow Mo Guys and Rooster Teeth, where he talks about Slow Mo Guys things because of the slow-mo footage is such high resolution, and it shoots for like 3 seconds, turns out to be like 4 terabytes of data in this like one little clip, to the point where Linus Tech, the guy who does like PC builds and storage solutions and all this kind of stuff on YouTube, helped Gavin build 130 terabyte like mega server of his storage stuff to store all of his old files. And he was like, yeah, I'll probably fill this in like 6 months. And Linus was like, oh god, why am I spending all this time, and you're going to use this in like 6 months? It's like, well then I can access stuff, because he showed him his actual storage, and it was just a bunch of hard drives in a drawer. And he was like, so which one's which? He's like, I don't know, I just plug them in and see what happens. Oh my god, that makes my brain hurt so much. It's like, you haven't numbered them or put a date on them or anything? It's like, I mean, some of them, there's some stickers. Some of the stickers fell off 2 years ago. I don't know. Oh no, it has to be properly archived and stuff. And now, because all three of us work on the cloud storage side of things, the three of us have agreed on like, here is the naming convention for episodes. When you're when you're labeling outtakes, this is what to label them. When you upload them to SoundCloud and publish them on Patreon, you need to use this file format, and blah 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 blah. Yeah. And because Gavin is essentially a one-man band, except for Dan, who obviously co-hosts, but Gavin does all the editing and the storage and all the file stuff. He was just like, I don't know, as long as I know where it is, it's fine. It's like, oh my god, that is terrifying for that amount of data. And like you said, huge YouTuber. He's got like 10 million subscribers, something like that, something absolutely crazy, even more than that. Last time I checked, it was 10. It's 14.2 million subscribers. So
yeah, insanely high.
Fairly important. Like, and some of it is legit. Like, this is the first time this has ever been recorded in this way. Kind of not groundbreaking, but you know what I mean. More groundbreaking.
It can be if it's applied properly. For science, it's very interesting. For human curiosity, but I would say it's a lot up there with the interstellar mindset of Chris Nolan saying, "Can you do this to map out what a black hole looks like?"
Oh yeah.
I mean, yeah, okay. You know, it's like, well, seeing glass crack frame by frame, is that abuse? It's like,
it's so fast.
It could be.
Fast. Yeah.
It could be eventually abuse if you know how to actually, manufacture glass to sort of counter that in a way. You don't know the application of it until you discover it. It's what science tends to be, as I'm sure Jack will confirm.
Yeah.
You just muck around, find some stuff, and go, oh crap, let's try and replicate that as best as we can.
And so much stuff is discovered by accident as well.
Yeah, entirely.
The famous example is penicillin. Like, oh, I didn't mean to make penicillin, but sure, yeah, why not? This is a byproduct of that. Like,
take that, death.
Exactly. Oh, see Toothless waking up in the background there.
Oh yeah. She's not been great recently, is that right?
She's been ill, unfortunately, but there she is lurking in the background. She's gonna give herself a quick lick. Wake up and lick. That is the way of the cat.
Jesus. Yes, so yeah, we've been good. Hope you're all well. But physical media storage is a weird thing, and YouTube will eventually pop, and they'll be like, people will be surprised that it's all gone. And then what's weird is for historic purposes, for storage purposes, it's like, do we really need all the fucking Logan Paul videos ever? It's like, yes, of course we don't, but kind of do as a species to show what we shouldn't be. In the same way that some people say,
here's an example,
yeah. I mean, here's the best example I can give you from history, and it's going to sound ridiculous, but I'm going to say it to you.
Uh-oh.
The Rosetta Stone is one of the most important discoveries mankind has ever.
I don't think anyone has said Logan Paul and Rosetta Stone in such close proximity to each other.
It's because he talks so many levels of shit. No, and Rosetta Stone, if you don't know, it's an old plinth, basically, for the sort of Ptolemaic era, which has, well, I won't say what it is just yet, but it's text in Greek, I want to say it's Arabic, and hieroglyphs. And because it's the first time people have actually, well, there were many of these things, but one's a sort of little stone that was uncovered. It's like, holy shit, this is really important, because hieroglyphs, we had like an idea of what they might mean, but we assumed they were symbolic. I didn't realize it's actually a sound out language. Holy crap. And you can reverse engineer it, because we knew the ancient Greek. So like we figure out the Arabic side of it and figure out this. And it became a sort of That's why, for example, there's a company called Rosetta Stone about language translation, because it means suddenly hieroglyphs were able to be translated. We could understand so much about a lost, civilization, effectively. And it was amazing. And there's the original sitting in the British Museum, because of course it is.
Where else would it be?
And they make so many copies. You used to be able to touch it. Did you know that? You can go up and touch it. Yeah, really dumb.
Start oily, acidy fingers just wiping away all the incredibly important history.
Mm-hmm. I remember when I was also in the Valley of the Kings in Egypt.
And then the Brits stole it as always. Thank you, Andy.
What we do, we keep it there to be safe, except London was bombed during the war, so it wasn't that safe. But yeah, so effectively we made multiple replicas of it, so you can touch the replica now and it's there. But it's still a really important piece of history, except this is where I'm getting to the Logan Paul thing. The content of the Rosetta Stone is fucking dull. It is the equivalent of a flyer. Oh no, if you ever walked, especially in Britain, I know they're the same thing in America, probably in lots of Europe. You walk down the street and then you'll see, like with zip ties around a lamppost, this really boring council notification about land development and this different bylaws, why we're going to have a thing here soon. If you notice this, and really mundane things. That's what the Rosetta Stone basically is. Yeah, it's announcing bureaucratic, regional stuff change, and there'd be tons of these sorts of things. And they were literally just like someone would go look at it and go, whatever. But it's in multiple languages so that everyone could read and everyone would know what's going on, even though nobody actually gives a shit. Except now that little bit of trash is the equivalent of putting up a flyer saying, we're going to erect a footpath here. It's gone through many council.
It is in the reign of the new king, who was lord of the diadems, great in glory, the stabilizer of Egypt, and also pious in matters relating to the gods, superior to his adversaries, rectifier of the life of men, lord of the 30-year periods, like Hephaestus the Great, king like the sun, and the great king of the upper and lower lands, offspring of the parent-loving gods, whom Hephaestus has approved, to whom the sun has given victory. Living image of Zeus, son of the sun, get that? Ptolemy, the ever-loving, beloved by Ptah. And then it goes on from there. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's just like describing stuff.
Yeah, and because, of course, they had to do it in official language, because it was an official proclamation, it had, like, the official, the Pharaoh Ptolemy is one of, Alexander the Great's generals, or at least he actually was. So it's one of those weird things of how society. We're talking like literally 2,000 odd years ago, but to pull this back to Logan Paul, he's obviously a douche nugget. I don't particularly want to fight him, but he seems to fight people who talk about him. So,
and also retired boxers and MMA fighters for some reason.
Yes, exactly, and then still lose. And so basically, that kind of stuff can give more of an insight than you'd think to a society. The fact that we could end up with, like, what's the sole video that explains that YouTube was a thing, because our entire society of 2020 has been wiped out, and all we find is Logan Paul's weird apology video. And you're like, well, obviously they were acts of contrition, and he had to acknowledge there was a mistake.
He must atone before God.
Yeah. And it was in multiple languages, so it was obviously broadcast worldwide. This was a really important thing. You can see here the closed captions have many languages. Yeah. So from that, we can also infer the different nations. That's basically what it is. This one act of like, oh, that's a weird thing to have. Anyway, it was a weird tangent. Welcome to the live stream.
Also, welcome to the live stream. John Scarrett, who wants a girl called Rosetta. Did you get stoned with her, John? Was she Egyptian? I don't know.
Technically, she was Greek.
Yeah. She claimed to be Egyptian, but she was actually Greek. Oh, speaking of which, some bumhole licking going on right now.
Wait. Claimed to be Egyptian, but actually Greek. Speaking of which,
no, I meant like
some bumhole licking.
I meant John's habit with Egyptian and Greek women. There you go. There's live action.
For those who don't know, John Scarrett, obviously amazing artist who does a lot of our visual stuff for the icons and the EPs and things. He's also amazing talented artist in his own right, does lots of cool stuff. I really like his he did a poster for Halloween that as in the film Halloween. I really enjoy that. He does his art book with like the Hannibal stuff, and you can go to the store, pick up those things. It's really, really good.
I've got the Hannibal zine around here somewhere.
And he did. The reason I bring up the bum licking is because he does. He's been doing Saucy Saturday of late. He does a lot of erotic art. And it's really fucking good. It's really good. Fucking good. It's almost like a pun, except I hate puns. Yeah. So if you don't subscribe or follow Mr. Scarrett on things like Twitter and Instagram, you should. He's literally punching out amazing free art all the time.
We'll link to his Instagram.
Because as I said already,
chat as we speak.
If you want to preserve art and own it, buy it.
Yep, pretty much.
Yeah,
pretty much. Yeah, the link for John Scarrett's Instagram and website are both in the chat for you lovely people. So go and check out, as Matt said, his recent erotic adventures in his artwork on Instagram, and go and pick up either one of his zines or one of the posters and stuff that he's done. The prints and stuff are fantastic. I can highly recommend Keanu with Cats and Dogs is a fantastic one. And yeah, exactly. And yeah, I've got the Hannibal TV show art book that is fantastic. And coming up soon, Halloween print.
I like that print. That's really nice. I'm gonna have to get that. I don't have any fucking wall space, but I'm gonna have to get that. Damn it.
Nice.
Hang on, I don't have any wall space, but I do have gifted to me a Neil Breen piece of artwork. If you know Neil Breen, you'll know how absurd that is that was given to me, but I kind of love Neil Breen. He's such a useless twonk. Anyway, Breen aside, should we transition to talking about a good director?
We should do, shouldn't we? We really should. Some people have already guessed correctly. We had a comment on the Patreon post from Dr. Vincent, one of our longtime listeners and patrons. We had an early guess from Andy as well. He said, oh, by the way, I know who the director is. I've been sleuthing. So last chance to get some guesses in, ladies and gentlemen, for who we've got for the director showdown before I start sharing Matt's screen and we do the big reveal. It is a smaller contingency of films we've had before. We've had, 20 something and quite a few other more than 16s and stuff like that. We're down to a few less, should we say. There's a last little teaser for you. If you don't remember the teasers from previously, let me get those up for you as well.
While Jack's getting us up, if people are worried about the format, because we always say there's three of us, therefore it can never be a tie, it's always unanimous. Tim, again, laid low, and he said, we literally like an hour before we started recording, so what do we do? And we said, well, we'll carry on and things like that. And Tim very kindly donated or wrote down, these are my picks. And obviously he's clearly suffering because he's writing things that like spelling errors like that. So we know how he would vote, basically. So we can obviously throw out to you guys, see what the general consensus is, but we should hopefully have a bit of a unanimous thing here. So it should be smooth.
I hope so.
Yeah. It's like, Tim, quickly vote on all the Ridley Scott films. Oh, God!
All 25 of them. So the last teasers were, he was a film critic before becoming a director. He directed a British TV miniseries in 2018, and they have been nominated for the Palme d'Or 3 times at the Cannes Film Festival. Is it Matt?
No, it's not me.
No. We're rating every episode of Super Happy Kill Time.
We'll be here a while. everything crosses over and intersects. And Jack's like, exactly. I'm not in this one. No points. I'm not in this one. No points.
Nil point. No, not for me. No. Oh, look, I'm here. 10 out of 10. Guaranteed. Yes, for those of you who haven't guessed, we've got a fantastic guest from John Scarrett. I think he guessed this last month as well. It's got to be Fred Durst. We've got to talk about The Fanatic.
Take it to the Matthews Bridge.
And all his classic. And, of course, Uwe Boll. Because it's Sequelisers. No, we refuse to Uwe Boll. But we do actually have a correct guess. As I mentioned earlier, Andy Steen has been doing some sleuthing. And he's worked it out. And we'll do the big reveal with Andy's comment. Park Chan-Wook, who we've talked about quite a few times on the show before, funny enough, with the trilogies episode and with the food episode, as we'll get into. And yeah, here we go, ladies and gentlemen. Bam! The films of Park Chan-Wook. And Matt, if you want to, I'll go full screen so we can.
I've got to change screen so I can actually find where I'm looking. 1 second, please.
So we've got the full brackets there. There are 8 films, so unfortunately we are having to exclude a couple of them. But if you zoom in the middle there, Matt, we'll show.
I am trying. Why can't I zoom in? Oh, good God! It was going so well. 1 second, gentlemen and ladies and gentlemen.
Can you just control and scroll your mouse wheel or whatever? Does that work on Mac?
It's a Mac. This thing is just an orb. Don't worry, I'll work on it.
What is that smooth wheel? There we go.
Yeah, that's not great for zooming out, unfortunately. So,
we can stay zoomed in. We don't need to zoom out. That's fine.
Okay, we're good. We're good. So we have Old Boy, Stoker, Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance, Lady Vengeance. They're going to be tricky.
That's going to be cool.
Then we have The Handmaiden. I'm a Cyborg, but that's okay. Joint Security Area and Thirst. I was asking my wife about this, what she was doing, what she was thinking. It was a tricky one. Not gonna lie, it becomes very much a subjective, like this. And as we say, the moon is the sun's dream is a really hard one to get a hold of. San Joe's the same sort of thing.
It's one I've not seen as well.
It's 1992. You can still tell he's very good. You can still tell it's there. You still, all the talent and skill is there. That's great, but it is also a tricky one to gauge.
Yeah,
because it's like anyone early in their career, you don't really get much of a inkling or impression of what it's about and what the style is, because they're obviously, he went away for another 8 years and then comes back with his effective debut as far as, let's face it, South Korea and the world is concerned with Joint Security Area. But we will get to all that good stuff soon. I would say, though, this man doesn't make bad movies.
This motherfucker don't miss.
No, every single one of these is a stone cold goddamn masterpiece.
Yep.
Maybe some less so than others, but they still have their own qualities and amazing. And it's the comparing them against each other that's quite difficult. People assume that 2 or 3 of them are misses, but I think they're misinterpreting too because they just didn't understand him or expect it to be the same as everything else he's done before, etc. Which again we'll come back to. But I mean, the Korean new wave with Bong Joon-ho and Kim Ji-yoon and Park Chan-Wook as well, or Park Chan-Wook as it should be said, is just 3 filmmakers who have kind of defined the last 20 years of South Korean cinema and propelled it and jettisons it into
and made some of the best films of the 21st century.
That's exactly it. Yeah,
straight up. Not in terms of Korean cinema. Just full stop, some of the best films.
And that's the key thing here. That's why Parasite winning the Oscar is so important, because it means that the eye has been on this sort of, let's face it, very small peninsula for a very long time for the film world. And it says to the rest of the world, you should be really watching this stuff. But subtitles, shut the fuck up. You need to watch these things. And yeah. Anyway. So yeah, Jack, do you want to talk about some of your experience with Park Chan-wook?
We'll get into individual films as we go through them, obviously.
Cool.
I've already talked about Old Boy on the show before, as I mentioned, and from that screenshot you can see it upsets me every time he eats a fucking octopus. You have sung the praises of Handmaiden a lot, Matt. I know one of your favorite films of the last few years. Damn right. I watched it this morning, so there you go.
For the first time?
Yes, for the first time, yeah.
Oh, shit, we'll get to that shit later.
Yeah. There's one of I still haven't seen Joint Security Area, but I've seen all the others. So, I'm mostly up to date on Park Chan-wook. But yeah, I think I first saw Old Boy, which was unsurprisingly my introduction to his work. On DVD about 10 years ago, probably something like that. So I'd been my very early 20s, late teens. I watched it at university with a few friends, and we absolutely loved it and never wanted to watch it again, which is the sign of a true masterpiece.
An experience.
It's an experience and a half, that fucking movie. I put it along the lines of The Machinist and 12 Years a Slave, where it's well, that was fucking amazing. I never want to watch it again because I feel terrible.
Another director will probably come up with at some point soon will be Darren Aronofsky, and I imagine that's the same reaction. Wow, no, I'm good, thanks. My example, same sort of thing, really. So, I watched JSA first, I want to say.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, because that sort of was released as an important thing in like 2001 on DVD, I think. And I was like, this is really cool. I know nothing about Korea. And except for like A Bittersweet Life and a few other little bits and pieces and films. And again, the classic thing was I was a teenager at the time. I was misattributing Hong Kong movies, Japanese movies, Chinese movies, and Korean movies as I think it's this one, and that sounds awful. And acknowledging that because again, I was a stupid fucking teenager. And another key point here.
Young racist Matthew. We remember those days.
But it was more the idea that the internet wasn't what it is now. It wasn't a comprehensive list. There was no Wikipedia and shit like that. You just got these things. And for example, I got into a little bit of trouble. So, and I coughed and died. I used to write for a magazine called Neo, and they're a sort of Asian culture magazine. They did obviously like video games and films and TV and so on and so forth. And I still think I was right in this argument. I was asked to review various things, and when I would review certain things, I would use the Eastern naming format. So I would say Park Chan-Wook, and they said no, call him Chan-Wook Park. That's our format. That's if you ever work for a magazine or any other writing publication, you go with the house style. But I was brash and annoying. And interestingly, Bong Joon-ho wins. No one calls him Joon-ho Bong. And then I had to actually stop and say it in my head out loud, and that's fine. But similarly, it's interesting where culturally speaking, we do use people's first names and second name in different things. Anyway, so I reviewed for them a DVD or upcoming DVD release of 3 short films called 3 Extremes. This horror anthology sort of thing is goddamn masterpiece. I said the same thing in my review, I'm pretty sure. It's Fruit Chan doing dumplings, which is disgusting. It's Park Chan-Wook doing Cut, which is very fun, actually. It's very good. It's very fun. An extra, basically getting his revenge on a director. And Takashi Miike doing a film called Box, which is very unsettling. I won't say anything other than that. They're great. You can check them all out. I did that review, I think, in 2004, like 20, whatever it was, for this magazine. I really enjoyed it. And at that point, Old Boy had just been dropped and released and was out as well. So I was like, oh God, this guy did JSA and this. Oh, this is amazing. So I was very focused on that. I think, if anything, I was a little disappointed that Cut wasn't as impactful as it could have been considering his other works, etc. So I was well aware right out the gate. And because I enjoyed those things so much at the age of, like, as I say, like maybe 18, 17, whatever it was, it informed so much of how I went forward. So for the last 20 years, I have been devouring so much South Korean content from different filmmakers.
Glad you clarified and said not North Korean content now, Matthew.
I've been devouring North Korean content.
Hail
the glorious leader, ever eternal. But yes, no, I've said this on the podcast multiple times. I'm pretty sure I've said it on a stream multiple times. South Korea is producing some of the most amazing and innovative and fascinating cinema that is, at one point, or in one aspect, so very South Korean. It is in one regard like, oh, it's such a localized thing. It's like it's going to appeal to very, South Korean sentiment. And the other way, it's like, no, this is universal. Everybody can relate to the idea of suddenly this country, which had a bit of a hard time, is now really rich, and corporations and conglomerates and rich dickheads are assholes who are ruining everything, and there is a very clear us and them divide. And that's why when Parasite came out, I'm like, oh my God, it speaks to so much. It was like, does it? It's like, yeah, everyone's going through this. It's the nature of capitalism and every type of, aggressive society. But equally, in the background, the whole time, there's also the threat of North Korea just sitting on your doorstep, and the idea of the disconnection between people who are relatives that are so close and yet so brainwashed and disenfranchised. It's a crazy, situation to be juicing into, in the same way that East and West German cinema, all that sort of stuff. It just, magnificent point in time in terms of that, but obviously horrible because of the system. Now, Park Chan-Wook himself is mislabeled, shall we say. In my opinion, Old Boy shot him and South Korean cinema to the forefront with the new wave stuff. And everyone said, "Oh, you know what's good about him? He's violent." Tarantino said he's amazing. Oh, everyone's so cool.
Yeah,
oh,
he
so
was
visceral.
Asian Tarantino. He was kind of labeled as, wasn't he?
Yeah. And that's branding shit. That's what it is. And like, what was his previous one? Oh, I did like a vengeance one. Oh, I did another vengeance one. Oh, there's so much blood and revenge. It's like, yeah, that's not really what he's about. He's about these visceral experiences, but he in my mind executes movies the way that David O. Russell thinks he executes movies. David O. Russell, if you don't know, is the director of Joy and American Hustle and Silver Linings Playbook and The Three Kings and tons of other stuff. I Heart Huckabees, which I do not like. And he's always maintained that he doesn't like scripts. Very, very worrying sentence. He loves the idea of characters and just in the moment and just filming bits and pieces. And I'm like, yeah, I get that. Park Chan-Wook is that kind of filmmaker. The story is amazing, but really the whole story is just a setting or a backdrop for interesting characters to do interesting things. So what you end up with is sometimes watching these movies, they can feel really discordant. They can feel all over the place. The resolution can feel like, what the fuck happened? I'm a little confused. Like, no, we wouldn't be saying. No, it's not what happened. It's who did it happen to and why did it happen that way. It's a strange thing to describe because I'm saying like the story doesn't matter, but the story is one of the most important, interesting parts of it. But I'm probably misselling it. But there is one particular one on here that I'm like is a prime example of that, where it's a very underrated piece that people go, I don't know if I like it. It's like you do, you just don't realize it. But yes, I'm rambling.
Should we get stuck in?
We should. I'm going to zoom in as soon as I've had a sip of water.
I've got my Rotten Tomatoes ready. I'm primed. We'll discuss box office. We'll discuss Rotten Tomatoes ratings.
Okay.
And as Matt said, there's only two of us, so if there is dissension, we will head to you, dear viewers, and see what you guys think. But we've also got Tim's picks as well to break any ties, just in case. So
I think. Sorry, one thing we haven't done, which we sometimes forget to do. Jack, who do you think is going to win?
I think the final is going to be Old Boy versus The Handmaiden. Probably The Handmaiden would be my guess.
Here's my prediction. I don't disagree with you. I think it's going to be The Handmaiden. Having said that, other than maybe two of them, I'm looking at them right now. If any of these won, I'd be able to say, yeah, no, I completely see why. It's going to be very hard to separate and logistically analyze it. And also, because let's face it, the more, and this is a good sign, to be honest. We said there's less so with like, say, for example, our Sam Mendes breakdown. The more you go on as a director, the better you should arguably get. You should be creating new stories that are interesting and pushing the envelope in how film is executed and made. If you've stagnated, if you're, without being awful, if you're doing a Francis Ford Coppola and you're like, oh yeah, there's a window there, so good, and then
just ignore everything that came after that.
Yeah, that's crushing. You don't want that. You want someone who's gonna be like, what's his best movie? Again, I think that Kurosawa said that. It's like, what's your favorite movie? My next one.
Yeah.
It should be that way. Like whatever's next is gonna be my best film. But anyway, let's have a zoom in now. We've had our initial predictions. Old Boy and Stoker. Whew. So do you want to give a rundown of what the hell they are?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So Old Boy is a adaptation of a comic. It's a manga. It's actually Japanese manga.
Yeah, it's manga.
I was wondering if it was going to be a Korean one or not, but it's actually Japanese manga, and it's about. Again, I will try and do this as my best without spoiling too much, because I do think people should watch these movies. It is about a man who is kind of unpleasant, shall we say. And this is the thing about this movie, and a lot of Park Chan-Wook stuff. He tends to present individuals in a fairly neutral way, and they're all kind of dislikable, so that you can decide who is someone to side with. The protagonist, antagonist, it kind of like, well, they're all kind of dicks, because that's very humanizing. That's very, So he is randomly imprisoned for 15 years. Very Count of Monte Cristo. I think he doesn't know why. Then he's randomly let out and doesn't know why. Then he pieces things together. He befriends this young girl, and he's running around, trying to find out what's happened. Why he finally uncovers the mystery, and it's kind of brutal. There's an overriding theme for 3 of these movies, which is obviously the Vengeance trilogy, and they're mostly linked by the 3rd film. We'll get to that later. And the overriding theme is vengeance is not something either of any of the main characters have. It's almost like an unseen tertiary character who is vengeance, and vengeance is pointless. You achieve nothing. Old Boy is almost the introduction to everybody to this director. Old Boy is a magnificent piece of cinema. Old Boy is frankly genius and holds up magnificently and is inspired. So some people have tried to imitate Old Boy, from corridor scene fights to visceral stuff.
If you've seen a hallway fight in The Raid or a hallway fight in the Daredevil Netflix show, they are directly inspired. That one-shot tracking kind of thing where one man has the shit beaten out of him by 15 people but eventually comes out on top, and it's brutal and realistic and exhausting and violent. Old Boy kind of started that. There is a hammer, there is a man, and there is a corridor full of 15 blokes, and Desu, the main character guy, just beats the shit out of people. And he's as you said, Matt, he's not exactly a nice bloke. There's not really a good guy and a bad guy. He's a protagonist, but like he's the character we follow through his journey. And as I've said before, and as you can see from that screenshot there, some real horrible shit happens over and over and over again. Emma and I went out for drinks last night, and just like, oh, what are you doing for the live stream tomorrow? It's like, oh, we're doing Park Chan-Wook, is blah blah. I've told you about Old Boy before. She's like, yeah, you mentioned it. Remind me what it was about. And I basically got the Wikipedia up, and I was like, oh yeah, I forgot that happened. Oh, I forgot that happened. And like, again, not spoiling it, I listed off a bunch of stuff, and she was like, that's awful. I'm like, yeah. That's about 40 minutes into the film. I was like, and I went on again. It's like, oh my god, that's even worse. And yeah, it just gets more and more brutal and more harrowing. But it is, captivating watching.
It's unfortunate it's gone against Stoker, because there's so much attachment to Old Boy that just to ruin this, Stoker doesn't stand a chance.
Agreed.
However, Stoker is really, really interesting.
Stoker's really good as well. Yeah, exactly. It's one I hadn't seen until, I want to say, a couple of years ago, probably. I didn't see it in the cinema or anything like that. I saw it on a streaming service not too long ago. And yeah, was I would say pleasantly surprised, as if I don't love Park Chan-wook's movies, but yeah, I was really, really surprised at how much I enjoyed it, and then found out it's written by Wentworth Miller, the actor, the guy from Prison Break. Yeah, the guy from Prison Break. Yeah, the guy who plays Captain Cold in The Flash and Legends of Tomorrow wrote that film, and obviously directed by Park Chan-wook.
Yeah, so basically, it's a very interesting script. There's something called the blacklist in Hollywood. Not like, oh no, you're being demonized, but the idea is that there's a list of scripts which are like, these are the best unproduced scripts,
and they just kind of float around
out there. Yeah, and there's a Hitchcock film called Shadow of a Doubt, which I really love. One of my favorite Hitchcock films, very underrated, about an uncle and a niece both called Charlie, and he's clearly a bit of a creepy murderer, and this movie starts with Mia Wasikowska playing this young girl who turns 18, and her mum, Nicole Kidman, are suffering from the loss of India's father. Mia Wasikowska's character, sorry. Anyway, so he dies, Stoker, by the way. India Stoker, sorry. So he dies in a car accident, and at the funeral, randomly, Matthew Good plays this character, Charlie. Again, there's the link to Shadow of a Doubt, who is the dead husband/father's younger brother, just turns up. India didn't know he existed. He's like, what's going on here? And he just says, yeah, I'm moving in permanently. And Nicole Kidman's obviously very flattered and happy.
I'm here to help.
Exactly. And it becomes this wonderful psychological crush, because it's clear he's very twisted. He first starts moving in on Nicole Kidman's character, which Mia Wasikowska hates. Like, what are you doing? That's my dad's. That's my mum, basically. It's my dad's wife. It's your brother's wife. And then he starts taking interest in her, which is just as creepy. But he's also quite enigmatic and charming. So it basically he turns up as, for lack of a better word, this devilish character saying, it's all right to kill people, right? That kind of awful, twisted, throwing your morals into to dispute at the age of 18 and things like that. And she gets this gift of a kid. There's so much going on into it. I'm not going to get into it, but basically the idea is that it's a riddle within a riddle and a mystery, and it ends in a very way that it's so much symbolism going on, and the symbolism is kind of more important than the actual events itself. The crime drama aspect of it is good, but the stuff between as I said about Park Chan-Wook's sort of style and the projects he sort of is attached to, the symbolism and what the characters are representing and going through is much more fascinating, and it's very much a case study of these individuals, these frankly a lot of psychopaths. And it's a really well done film. It's very different from Park Chan-wook's other stuff to a degree, in the sense that because it's an English language movie, we analyze this stuff differently. It's strange. It's not like it's there's a guy called Koreeda, who is a Japanese director. He did a French movie with Juliette Binoche, and it's not like it's a bad movie, but everyone grades it differently because it's like, Japanese person directing in France. And it's like, this is now a South Korean director doing something in America, with obviously usual cast. Is Clint Mansell is obviously doing the music. He's got his cinematographer Chun who's South Korean as well. So the editor isn't South Korean. It's a bit of a sort of medley mixed mash production, and I think for that reason some people didn't appreciate it at the time. It's a very much an underrated piece, but it is really, really entertaining. And if it was anyone else's like oeuvre, it would be like a really strong element. The problem is that Park Chan-wook's stuff is already really fucking strong. So again, not to ruin stuff, I think this vote is going to be. What did Tim say? Should we start with what Tim said?
Sure.
Tim said, "Old boy beats Stoker." So that's one for Tim.
He's not. Yep. Fair enough. Just to quickly touch on, Old Boy came out in 2003.
Oh, sorry.
It has an 81% on the Tomatometer with an audience score of a 94%. So yeah. Get ready for some high numbers here, folks. There are some very high numbers, as we talked about with the Scorsese side of things as well last month. For Stoker 2013, as you said, Matt, 70% on the Tomatometer and just a 60% on the audience rating.
Yeah, I think audience were expecting another violent Old Boy kind of thing.
I mean, this gets pretty violent, but it's in a very different way and psychologically twisted. And I think it's one of those things is you run into with Park Chan-wook's work. He's like, they're uncomfortable to watch a lot of the time. And as I mentioned, Old Boy has haunted me to this day. There are so many elements of these films, whether it's the Vengeance trilogy, whether it's Stoker, whether it's Old Boy. There's this I don't know how I feel. Am I supposed to like this person? Am I supposed to like anybody? Are they all terrible? Even like the protagonist, as you said, India Stoker, is like, she does some terrible, horrible things, and I'm not sure I should be supporting her. But you almost like in a Breaking Bad, Sopranos kind of way. You're like, I guess I'm cheering her on. I guess because I want to see what happens.
Classically, whoever inverted commas wins at the end of the movie, you're like, oh shit, the world's a worse place. There's no good outcome.
Oddly enough, I believe you can watch Stoker on Disney Plus at the moment under the Star banner, which is all the adult content. So yeah,
it's a creeping dread, very uncomfortable film, but it's very good. Again, I say this again. Every one of these movies has really standout, memorable moments. There's not one where I'm like, which one is this again? Because I can tell very quickly going, oh yeah, no, that's one scene that really stands out to me. And that's very much a credit to an artist. You can see all the paintings by, Renoir or some shit. You're like, yeah, there's that one, I guess is okay. But no, if you've got a film where you can remember at least something stand out from every single one, that is a testament. And 70% is not a bad score. That's higher than some of the stuff we've been reviewing on our show from part one, let alone like the sequel we're fixing. So,
and anyway. Old Boy is available on Shudder, the horror subscription service. If you want to go and check that out as well. So,
I wouldn't count it as a horror, but I get it. It's very horrific to endure.
It is classified as a neo noir. I think most people think of it as like a bit or a thriller, that kind of thing,
Yeah.
rather than a horror. But yeah, I'd agree.
Yeah. Okay. So we have Tim's vote. I think it's unanimous from both of us, isn't it, Jack?
Yep, let's go for Old Boy. As much as I like
Let's lock it
Focus,
in.
Old Boy.
Nom 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 octopus. Okay.
Nom 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 that octopus. Speaking of Old Boy and the Vengeance trilogy,
Yeah, it's gonna be tricky.
we're back round to some vengeance.
Okay. 2 movies here. And much like, as I said, like Bong Joon-ho and Kim Joo-eun, Park Chan-wook works with the best talent in Korea. He genuinely doesn't. He's worked with just some of the biggest names you can think of, in their industry. He's worked with them at some point in his career. Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance is one of his earlier films. Came out in 2002. It is, of the 3 Vengeance movies that are linked, i.e., Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance, Old Boy, and Lady Vengeance. This is the most clear cut that vengeance is meaningless, and it's one of the most tragic, because it's like, as you're watching this film, you're like, oh, I can actually sympathize with everybody involved, and therefore I don't know who I want. No, I kind of don't want any of this to happen. This is all very tragic. This is all so unnecessary. This is so needlessly unnecessary. And it's like, that's the point. So without going too much, there is a deaf mute man, Ryu, and his sister who requires a kidney transplant. And basically, they don't have the money for it. They don't got they get conned by organ dealers, and it's all very awful. So Ryu and his girlfriend think, well, again, that classic, very South Korean thing of like, well, we're poor and we're being exploited here, and it's for a good cause. We should do what's called a good kidnapping. The idea that these are rich people, they can afford to, pay. They don't care. This is something like
pay a ransom and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and this is something that was Kurosawa dealt with, like high and low, for example, they had crime and kidnapping, and to be fair, I think it's one of the reasons why, like we mentioned before, why Guillermo del Toro can't go back to live in Mexico, because kidnapping is just a very high thing for certain criminal elements to say, like, kidnap, pay a ransom, get released, done, and then you won't notice the money missing. I could use a bird, that kind of thing. But you do actually think to yourself, no, I could think I kind of understand their reasoning, and then you go along and find that this individual, who's Song Kang-ho, who's the president of this manufacturing company, and he's not a bad guy. And it's like, yeah, but you have been exploiting people, kind of. Yeah, not really. So he wants his daughter back, and so much of the actual really decisive moments of this movie are not seen. You only see the impact and the fallout from it. And I could talk about the imagery. I mentioned earlier about that. The events are kind of almost irrelevant next to the impact on the people. There's one image of a person, I won't say anything other than that, floating along the back of the shot, submerged in water like this. It is masterful in how it's done in terms of cinema. I mean, it's not like what you expect, like a really beautiful, perfectly lit scene. It's shot outside in a river, but the way it's framed and timed in the edit is just, it's like, wait, what's happening? Oh fuck, no, and you get really invested in this stuff. And you know that everything that's going to happen is going to mean nothing to anybody, and it's going to ruin everybody's lives. Fascinating movie. Massively underrated in the Vengeance trilogy because it's the first one, and therefore it doesn't look as slick, shall we say? Even though he shot this and Old Boy back to back.
I think the gritty and griminess of Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance is counteracted not by the slickness of Old Boy, but like, I wouldn't consider Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance as a neo-noir. Do you see what I mean? Like, that is very clearly
that's a
almost a more realistic, the way, like you said, the way it's shot, it portrays the world in a more realistic sense, whereas Old Boy feels a bit more stylized, feels a bit more influenced by noir detective stuff and other neo-noir stuff that's come before it. Whereas the Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance feels a bit more real worldy. I don't know if you know what I mean. Like this, not necessarily shot like a documentary, as you said. It's beautifully shot, but the gritty and griminess feels a bit more straight in your face, if that makes sense.
Yes.
And it's a bit of a shock to the system.
I think so. I think so.
Yeah. So starting with Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance, just a 54 on the tomatometer.
That's a very hard one, yeah. Because at the time it came out.
I think it's much, much, much better than that, personally. And an 85% on the audience score, which is far more in line with what I would personally expect it to be around.
I think it's because it was quite visceral and violent, and it came out just after this really intense political thriller that was really important and meant a lot to Koreans. I think they went, "Oh, this is just trashy," and that's the problem. And that's me just assuming. And also, people go back and watch Old Boy and say this one came before it, and say, "Yeah, it's kind of boring." There will always be that.
Yeah, but Old Boy's better, right? And you're like, well, we'll find out.
Yeah, nobody eats an animal in this one.
Good.
Brings us to. Oh, I should point out that the titling is very interesting. Old Boy is Old Boy. That's it. It's like, it's old Buru for the translation, but Vengeance is Mine is the translation for sympathy for Mr. Vengeance, and that is because I think it's translation of the religious idea, like vengeance is mine was like a biblical sort of thing, like only God can have revenge. That's why you can't. That's why killing is pointless. That's why we have the judicial system. Something eye for an eye doesn't matter, etc. And it fulfills that thing. I think it's a really good analysis of revenge and its futility. Now, Lady Vengeance is really tricky because I'm pretty sure it's called Lady Vengeance solely for us because it was not called Lady Vengeance in South Korea. It was called Kind-Hearted Gunja, Gunja, which is the main character's name.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't have worked at all, but they obviously tied it in. And there's lots of elements of this one that links into Old Boy and Sympathy with Mr. Vengeance retroactively. And it's one that actually repurposes dialogue from the other films as well to try and tie in the whole. If you would build a pyramid between Old Boy and Sympathy with Mr. Vengeance like this, it's the central strut at the bottom that links them. Otherwise, it's just two things that meet at the top and go, oh, there's a sort of commonality here. No. There is a thread along the bottom that makes this work. I'm not saying they exist in the same universe or anything like that at all, but it's because there's repeating actors and recurring faces and things like that.
Yeah.
So this one is about
essentially, quote unquote, the protagonist in Old Boy is played by Choi Min-sik, who is the bad guy, or one of the bad guys, to put it in a way, in Lady Vengeance, and his character is the worst. not to put too fine a point in it, he murders children and it's fucking awful. And I'm trying not to spoil anything, but he is a real fucking piece of work. Basically, to again, it's so surface level stuff for just a synopsis. This character, the main character, goes to prison, and it starts with her being released from prison. There's lots of flashback sort of stuff, and she's serving out a sentence for something she didn't do. Specifically, like, oh, how did you kill these children? Tell me. And she's there's a weird thing in Korea and Japan, I think China as well, where as part of the confession, they make you recreate the crime with a mask on, like a Sorry, I'm just going to come back to what? Oh, fuck, that's terrifying.
Yeah, a PPE COVID mask kind of thing, and it's like, well, show us what you did, show your contrition, so we can picture it in like a reenactment. And I know that happens with certain things. So the film opens with like her effectively being blackmailed into doing it. So okay, fine, and it's like, there's a bed and there's like a model, like a little dummy of a child, and she takes a pillow, just like smothering this child, and rips a mask off and stares into the cameras and stuff. And it's like, oh, she's a fucking killer, and you know what? I can see her doing it because I can see in her eyes they're doing it now. I think the idea is supposed to be very much a cultural thing of like, show me you feel guilt by doing it again. And it's like, interesting. Anyway, so she didn't do this. She had a terrible time in prison. She gets out of prison. She was given like this support from this really sort of Christian group, and she's like, "Nah, fuck you. I'm not here with what you think." She adopts this new persona of sort of Lady Vengeance. Has this very special, cool gun made, and she just cleans fucking shop. She just goes out and takes everybody involved. She goes after the real killers and stuff like that. The one who, there's like snuff tapes. It's all awful, awful stuff. and there's a version called the black and white version, or black to white version, I think I want to say, where the thing starts out in
It's
color.
fade to black and white is what it's called.
That's exactly, yes. Thank you. Yes, and it fades to black and white. It's a weirder one. I mean, we're going to talk at some point in the future about the idea of modern black and white films and things being re-released in black and white. This is one that on the DVD and Blu-ray release you can opt either one. I think there's an interesting comment about the idea of being flush with color and then slowly become more and more desaturated. And there's a weird dream sequence with a rocking horse looking thing with the guy. I'm not going to get into it, but the point is, it's weird and it doesn't resolve in the way you want it to, because it just goes like most of these films don't. You're like, yeah, I guess that's over now. And to misquote Burn After Reading, to come back to another one of our previous things, like, what do we learn? I guess not to do it again, whatever the fuck we did. And it's like, yeah, that's kind of it. It's like, what did we learn as a species? We're kind of messed up. But it's a magnificent film. But I have a real problem now, because I personally feel these two are on par. What's the Rotten Tomatoes like, Jack?
I totally agree with you, funnily enough. I mentioned 54% for Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance, 76% for Lady Vengeance from 2005. So
I don't disagree with the number, but I think Sympathy's the same.
Yeah, to put it slightly makes more sense, the audience score, as I said, for Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance is 85. Lady Vengeance is 87. So far more on par with each other, which makes a lot more sense to me.
So.
And I think this is one of the hardest, if not the hardest, one-on-one battle in this bracket.
This will be because either one deserves to progress without any issue.
Yep.
Should we see what Tim said?
What did Tim say?
To break our concern, Tim said, I'm just going to call up my little notes here. Tim said, Lady Vengeance pips Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance.
Interesting.
So that's one vote there.
What do you think, Matt? If you had to pick one.
I disagree. I think Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance is the better movie.
Oh.
I think its portrayal of revenge. I think the fact that it's, the actors involved and with Bai Jun-ah and Sang Kang-ho and stuff like that. It's like, it's just so good. It's so fucking. I mean, the other one feels like Old Boy to a degree, in that it's like, oh, it's one person going around, but she's much more cool and enigmatic than Odesu, being kind of just lost and a bit confused and bewildered and this awful person. She's quite twisted as well. But Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance is such a brutal, Les Miserables style conflict of like, oh, every one of these bastards is fucked. I'm so glad I'm not these people. Jack, it's up to you to split the tie.
I'm going to split the tie, and I agree with you, Matthew. Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance is my pick. I think the ending of that film is so haunting and so powerful that it gets my vote. I'm not saying the ending of Lady Vengeance isn't powerful as well, but yeah.
To reiterate what we said before, go watch all of these things.
They're all go wrong, basically.
Yeah. Each one will fulfill a different, simple, basic need in a different way, as well as all being about repulsion. So we're on to the right-hand side now. The Handmaiden versus I'm a Cyborg, but that's okay. Which is going to be another Old Boy, I'm afraid. This one's going one way and one way only, but we need to talk about them both.
Yep.
Let's start with I'm a Cyborg, but that's okay. I find this fascinating.
From 2006.
This is a really okay. There comes a time when you are a creative, when you're making a very specific type of content, and you have a family, and you start thinking, hang on, my kids can't watch any of my movies. They know I'm like a big deal, an award-winning filmmaker, but they can't watch any of this shit. I'm going to make a film for my daughter. That's what this movie is. And it is really sweet. It's really nice. It's the production design has been designed on all these things. Create this thing full of colorful pastel sort of colors, and it's got this sort of cartoony cuteness to it. It's just really sweet. Okay, so the story is about basically two people in an asylum, basically, for different reasons. One is worried that he can't take a mask off, or he won't be, what if he's invisible? What if he doesn't exist? He has a problem that's cognitive dissociation. He can't separate from himself and things like that. And that's horrible. And this other girl who is dealing with her own shit. Again, I try not to spoil things. It's a surrealist tale.
She kind of thinks she's a cyborg, right? That's
She
where
thinks she's
the
a
title
robot.
comes
Yeah, that's
from.
the whole. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you.
She tries to
thinks
like
she's a robot.
plug herself in and stuff, and they interpret that as a suicide attempt, and that's how she ends up in the institution and all that.
That's
kind of
right.
stuff.
Yeah, she works in a factory, and then suddenly she's like, "Bagunk!" And she's like, "Oh, well, she's actually, a basket case." And it's like, no. She's not like radio rental or anything like that. She's going through everything. She sees the world differently, and she finds another person who sees the world differently. And again, it's about that connection of finding people who see the world the same way, and the connection they have, and the support they have for one another. And it's just really romantic and really nice, but it's also one that, amongst all the violence and the visceral worst elements of human nature, people go, "Oh, it's kind of too boring. Don't like it. It's not really doing. It's not saying he's lost his edge." It's like, no, he hasn't. Don't be stupid. He's doing a different kind of story, and he's doing it well. Again, so yeah, what's your general reaction to Time of Cyborg, Jack?
Yeah, I liked it. I don't love it. It's I find it pretty, and something we talk about a lot. This is probably my least favorite on this list of the ones I've seen.
Most people would be,
because something we talk about a lot is because it's a weird, like, I find it quite jarring tonally. I think it's a really well acted and really well made movie, and you're totally right that it feels like a creator has suddenly gone, "Oh shit, I need to do something that's like family friendly." But it's still full of his really weird, dark shit as well.
It is.
If you're really like, if you're aware of his previous work and if you're really paying attention and all that kind of stuff, even if you're not, there's still some fucking weird shit going on in this movie. And there's this weird kind of, it's like too cute to be one of his typical more violent films or more harrowing films, but too dark to be like, hey, watch this with your kids kind of thing. I feel like it's almost like a film that has no target audience, and it doesn't quite doesn't fit quite comfortably in any particular category, which is quite interesting. Like the fact that it's this kind of cannot be defined by any genre. I think it's quite funny. I think it's quite cute, but yeah, doesn't quite hit as well for me. There's a great quote from a review I've got here that says, from Taranchanka from Asian Cinema Drifter, the film has a slower pace than the director's previous works, and it strikes a strange hybrid tone where it's far too cute to be like his dark revenge flicks, but it's a bit too dark and odd to be a full cute romantic date film. Some viewers may simply find that too jarring of a blend to enjoy this. And I don't fully agree, but that is kind of how I feel about it.
Yeah. Again, I think there's definite merit to it, but you're right. The whole like I'm making stuff for my daughter was like, yeah, it's still like a 12 or a 15. It's really weird. It's really uncomfortable to watch because it's again, it's the nature of what I've said the whole time. It's not about necessarily the story of these characters. It's about the characters themselves. It's like, oh, I get a feel for who they are, kind of, and who are they? Getting just messed up, and but they have each other, and again, as the title suggests, and that's okay. And I think there's so much wonder to it, but the problem is it speaks to a very specific audience of oddballs and oddities, which a lot of us are, so that's fine. But going into this work with any understanding of what this director is, who this director is, what he's produced, is why this one falls down on the bottom of the list for most people, which is fine. That's just
weirdly enough. Tomatometer. Have you seen this, Matt? Would you like to have a guess?
I haven't seen any of these things, so I don't know.
Okay.
I'd say 70s.
92.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
I mean, critics do appreciate when you can turn around and say, you know what I did? What? Something you never saw coming. And it's, again, as a critic myself, I'm like, yeah, I would have given this a positive review and say about the craft behind it is immaculately amazing. Yeah. And if they're saying like the fact that it's not just the same beat over and over and over and over, it is something different. It is something fresh. It's something that illustrates the skill and ability the director has in a very innocent setting to a degree. I can understand that. I can understand that. Crazy though.
That is probably because it's from 12 critical reviews.
Well, there we
So
go.
there you
Okay.
go. One of them gave it less than a 6 out of 10, and that's how you kind of end up there.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
That's how
Okay.
I feel about it. It's probably like a 7 out of 10 movie for me, and maybe an 8.
Sure. And that's high praise. That's a good movie. It's just when you have to be in a very specific mind frame for it. Yeah.
Yeah.
The Handmaiden.
The one you've talked about a few times on the show before. I think we even did it. Did we do it as what we've watched recently for Patreon? I can't remember. Because it's a 2016 movie, so it would be slightly before. We were talking about in 2017.
Yeah, when we did the show in its current format, we did a breakdown of the entire decade or 10 years on that best of the year.
Yeah,
and I just said 2016 Handmaiden, that one. I can't remember. I did it on a caveat of like either 2016, 2017, based on release year for us in England, or alternatively because of when it initially came out as a general release. But this movie is a masterpiece, and I do not use that word lightly. And I know I've sort of batted it around. It is every good word you can extol on a thing to say it is the best. It is the best. It is beautifully shot. It is masterfully edited. It is acted sublimely. Every single shot looks stunning and somehow just full of detailed design. The production design is wonderful, and it's horny as fuck, which shouldn't be a selling point because it's so in your face with it as well. It's frustrating almost because I want to recommend it to so many people, but it's so graphic at times that you're like, yeah. I mean, case point, like the intrigue behind it, which we'll get to in a second with the story. I'm like, my mum would love this. There's no way my Irish mammy's going to watch this. My very prudish Catholic mum. It's like, no fucking way am I recommending this to my mum. But the story's so good.
Yeah.
And it's a prime example of taking a book set in Victorian London and translating it to a different setting and improving that setting. So we'll get to Jack's pinch in a second, but just to give a rundown what the story is about. It's about Japanese occupied Korea, because for historical purposes, Korea, Joseon was this one country, then Japan occupied it before the war, then the war happened as in World War II, and then you had the Korean Peninsula War, which has left it in its current state of ceasefire, neutrality as it were. But this is back when they were literally, you are Korean and we are occupying you and you are a second-class citizen. You will serve us. And you've got Korean actors all speaking Japanese and things, and it's about this sort of, again, it's the classic thing we've been talking about, a ruling class of rich bastards who are unscrupulous and vile and hedonistic, and the arguably innocent Koreans who are, in this case, a bunch of thieves who are scamming them. And it's that classic, I was like, who am I supposed to side with here? And the best thing about this movie, it has technically 3 huge twists. I can't talk about any of them. And it changes the perspective of who we're talking to, who we're looking at, the story. It reruns certain things again, so you watch from a different perspective. And the whole thing of who's gaming who, like Dirty Rotten Scoundrels kind of thing, is both troubling and brilliant. So you as the audience suffer whiplash so much going back and forth, and you start to kind of chisel out who you want to succeed, shall we say. And every time you get close to it, it's like, oh, is this another part of it? Is this another ruse? I can't be committed anymore. I can't get into this. So the story is magnificent. Its execution is magnificent. I won't say anything other than that, but it is horny Tim emoji. Bang.
It is.
So Jack, you've seen it this morning or today or whatever it was. Sorry.
Yes, yeah. Well, earlier this morning. It is, as you said, a masterpiece. Yeah. You hyped it up quite a lot, and it did actually live up to the hype, which is nice.
I was so worried when I do that because
I thankfully I'd gone in as blind as I could. I knew nothing about the actual plot. You would give me essentially what you just said there, is that they're occupied Korea. Here's the setup. Go from there. Hit 2.5 hours later. Your mind is blown multiple times, kind of thing. And I think having that, and it's not in a kind of, not quite in a Rashomon kind of way. Use another kind of
I can see where you're
Japanese
going with
reference
that.
of
Yeah.
cinema, like seeing things from different perspectives. I think it does something different and does something I've not really seen done in a movie before, if that makes sense. In to the extent where it builds the structure around these different perspectives and how you then go, wait, but if that happened in like part one, how does that happen in part two? And then you work out like, oh, that happened before that, so that means that this guy must have been here when that happened. Oh shit! Okay, wow, that's really, that's awful, but great, not awful. Like
To run with that, I think it's like watching Rashomon, except rather than going, I don't know which one of these is valid. Maybe none of them. Maybe I don't know. But this one is like, all of these are valid. It's like that does work. And it's like,
exactly.
I hadn't even realized that. And to show you a character for like 40 minutes and go, this is everything we know because we presented it as the truth, and then say, okay, we're going to run that again for you, everybody. I say, okay, now this is the character as seen by a different character from a different perspective. Oh, and you see them from a different light, and then you see them again from a different light, and they think, hang on, and the last two versions are challenged. It's Run Lola Run kind of does the same
really
thing.
Help pay that off. Right?
Sorry, it was a bit yes, you're right. The performances are magnificent. I like career best kind of stuff. I think they're fantastic. So I don't know. Should we see what Tim said?
Quick little shout out from John Scarrett there.
Oh,
as an aside, Turulote's poster of The Handmaiden is insanely beautiful. I put a link to it in chat, so you go and check that out. Turulote is a fantastic comic book artist, and
the colourful embrace.
Yes, it is. Yeah, she's also the organizer of Thought Bubble, the comic book.
Oh wow!
Festival here in the UK. It's fantastic, and that
just
was available at Thought Bubble a few years ago, and is a bit of a masterpiece as well.
If you're seeing Jack cut in and out and freezing on the screen and stuff, Jack's internet's been quite crappy. Like, not his fault at all. He's done everything he can to make this work. We've had this problem with our records and things. We actually have to delay things. We've been working it out. Obviously, the stream, it's going to be a little bit thing. So, yeah, I'm pretty sure everything Jack said got through there without issue. Please feel free to spam the comments with what. But that was all clear, Jack. You're all good. Don't worry. But I've seen that bit of artwork. I think it's a very colourful embrace, if I remember correctly, and it is really cool. It's really nice. I approve.
Yeah.
What's the numbers from the old internets of Rotten Tomatoes?
We have the highest score of all of Park Chan-wook's movies. 95%.
That was 95%. If everyone didn't get that, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it's very hard to.
I'm cutting out a lot, I'm afraid.
That's okay. It's very hard to rate this stuff negatively, and the only thing I can imagine is, oh, it's a bit graphic, a bit lewd. Didn't need all that sex, did you? It's like, okay, I've said this many times before. Sex scenes in films are shit. They are disruptive. They slow the pace of the film. They're really dumb. They're limiting. They tell you exactly where the thing is shot and when, and it restricts the audience and blah, blah, blah. Not here. Because it feels, one, real, which is kind of weird and terrifying. Lust, Caution is another one, Ang Lee film. That's the same sort of thing where it's like, this is coming quite close to being real kind of stuff. This is quite graphic. But that's kind of the point, because the tragedy behind it serves the story. It's not gratuitous for the sake of it. It is illustrating the naivety of certain characters. It's illustrating the expertise and experience of character. It's experiencing the cultural aspect of things like, well, the innocent South Koreans were not corrupted as such, but there's this woman who is the height of, effectively early hentai sort of shit, sort of hokusai kind of images that the Japanese have brought in, and they're thoroughly, deviant individuals. And it tries, I'm saying it's a very broad cultural statement in a way, from the perspective of the film as those being oppressed by these individuals. That's kind of the point. It's to show, and also to show the women as both objects and empowered. It's masterfully done, but that's not the point. So I understand why it would be not a complete 100% on Rotten Tomatoes, even though, let's face it should be.
Yep. And needless to say, my vote goes to The Handmaiden. Tim, I know, pretty sure he goes for The Handmaiden as well. And
He
Matt,
did
you are
indeed.
unanimous, I believe.
Boosh!
Bam.
Handmaiden it is. This is a tricky one.
Not for me. I haven't seen one of them.
Okay. So let's start with Thirst, because that's a weirder one.
It is
Thirst
weird.
came out in 2009, in between I'm a Cyborg, but That's Okay, and Stoker. And it's based on a novel by Emil Zola. And it's a really weird but brilliant thing. Again, sold by these just astonishing performances. Song Kang-ho as well as this Catholic priest who has this virus and then because of a blood transfusion becomes a vampire. Take a couple of seconds with that. Moving on. And then he kind of falls for his friend's wife, and it's got the eroticism of what you call it? The Handmaiden, but so much more. And again, this is one that does feel people get sort of lost with and don't seem to understand. It has so much in the way of a character's fall from grace, shall we say, or just literally exploring a world from a new perspective, a new way of life, and just being just tumbling into deviancy and just giving into debauchery and babaism. It's but it's not, and it has all the action, it has all the violence, has all the erotic sort of thriller element of it, but it's kind of a horror, and it's kind of a genre defining, not defining, but genre bending kind of thing. It defies genre is what I think I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
And it ends so weirdly and almost unsatisfactory in a certain way because of everything that's taking place and going on. But it is, very, very, very interesting. The title is Thirst, as I say, for the nature of the whole vampire thing. But the original is Baktui, I think, which means bat.
It's originally supposed to be called The Bat, apparently.
Yeah, exactly. But I really like it. I think it's a fantastic film. I think it's really creepy and unsettling and beautifully shot. The production design, again, with the nature of colors and bringing certain things in terms of costume and this degradation of a disease and having Song Kang-ho just being bound up, almost like the Invisible Man kind of thing. It's magnificent.
Yep, I really like Thirst. I think it's easy to say that Song Kang-ho is one of the best Korean actors ever. His performance in Parasite is a perfect example. Like, he is essentially the lead character in Parasite, for those of you who've seen Parasite. He is obviously in Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance. He's in The Host, Taxi Driver, not that Taxi Driver, the other Taxi Driver. Yes. Snowpiercer, of course. I'm talking of Bong Joon-ho again. All these utterly fantastic movies, and he is just utterly fantastic. And I think his performance really not necessarily carries it, because that makes it sound like the rest of the movie is bad, but it really stands out and shines and allows him to.
Presence is such an important part of it. So it's impossible to
absolutely.
Get past.
He leads the film in a I was trying to think of the word. Not adequate, but like he leads it to the prominence that it should be, and he's utterly fantastic in it.
Yeah, I agree with that. Speaking of which, he's also in Joint Security Area.
I knew that, but like I said,
and again, his performance is so very standout. Okay, so here's a tricky thing with Joint Security Area. There is only one critique I have of it. But before we get to that, should we get some numbers? What's the old Rotten Tomatoes for
Thirst? Came out in 2009. It is 80% on the Tomatometer and a 75% audience score.
Again, people expecting another old boy and didn't like the discordant nature of the
on the lower end of things for Park Chan-wook's work,
and yet the higher for most directors in their lifetime.
Yeah, exactly. People dream of 80%.
Yeah. Joint Security Area. I mentioned before this was my sort of first introduction to Park Chan-wook. JSA is another masterpiece, and I have such affection
Mm.
for it because it was my gateway. It was my door into this thing. In the same way that the Old Boys for most people for Korean cinema.
Yeah.
And Parasite will probably be for a long time for those
Yep.
getting into Korean cinema now.
Parasite is a masterpiece.
Yeah. JSA is again, I remember sort of around early 2000s watching this and eventually watching it called Brotherhood and just not really understanding what the Korean War was, because we sort of have MASH over here kind of at times. I didn't really give a shit about it. It's like, oh, well, America, and when you're taught in school about, the various conflicts in the world in the 20th century, you learn bits. You learn usually the stuff that your country wins. So you learn World War II, and then you learn about Vietnam, because British people talk about Vietnam because we don't talk about us, messing up the Suez Canal at the time. So we talk about other people's failings and how it led to the Cold War as part of the Cold War and so on and so forth. We don't learn about the the Korean War, the Korean Peninsula, and the fallout from it. And the fact is that in 2000, and we mentioned this on our second Bond episode, the North Korea, South Korea, DMZ thing came into it, and everyone was like, well, not everyone, a lot of people were like, I don't know what that is. So to give a very, very brief history lesson.
Oh my God, okay.
But it will be very brief. North and South Korea are at a sort of state of permanent war, but they are in a state of kind of ceasefire. And the way that works is, since basically the 50s, where the war took place and never actually ended, there's kind of a standoff. And it is essentially, you stay your side, we'll stay our side, and we'll keep running interference the whole time. And there is what's called the DMZ, or the demilitarized zone, and it is this huge, huge mess of mines. And eventually, one day, if and hopefully when there is a unified Korea, that will be a disaster, because every time you've had countries that have had mines, you are still constantly picking mines out of the wilderness. A part of the Five Bloods Spike Lee film about Vietnam, still finding mines in certain areas, because that's so many years after the war in Vietnam. So this civil war between two countries is still kind of going. Now, what happens is there is something called the JSA, or the Joint Security Area, and it is part of a demilitarized zone where the two opposing sides from the south and the north sort of cross over, and a Korean, how would I put this? I can't remember her official thing. A Korean national who is actually a Swiss citizen who was born to parents. She has no actual ties to Korea in that way. She has no fondness, no affection. Korean's not really her first language. She has lived in Switzerland and South America, so she doesn't have any affinity for either, but she's a child of both. And it's like, okay. It's like, you're being brought in from Switzerland to mediate a crime scene. It's like, okay, well, what's happened? There's been a death, and there's North Koreans and South Koreans who are dead, basically. And it's like, okay. I was like, yes. And they've been plugged with 8 bullets, and everyone's being held. We need you to assess what's happened neutrally and resolve this as peacefully as possible. The Americans are desperate to go to war. We need this to be resolved. You, as a Swiss person, can go back and forth. You can go to Pyongyang in North Korea. You can go to Seoul in South Korea. You can interview everybody. You find out what you want. Great. And they built a replica of this thing itself, and just talks about those sort of opposing sides as like two shacks, and they look at each other all day. Now, what we learn throughout the film is that just through weird circumstance, mostly through an exercise getting lost and staying on landmine, that 2 North Korean soldiers and 2 South Korean soldiers have become friends and regularly skip across the border to go hang out with each other, and it's beautiful and it's very fun, and it's going to end badly because we've seen the start of the fucking movie. And I won't say much else other than that, but it really hit, not necessarily a nerve, but hit the public consciousness of like, it's tragic. And then to save each other, and then you find out why people do the things they did and what happened eventually. And Song Kang-ho plays this North Korean officer, and at one point he flips a table over. He's about to throttle Lee Byung-hun, and he's like screaming, like, and it's just this fury, and he's like, I will never ever allow the South Koreans to come in here. We're gonna crush you. We're gonna march on Seoul. We're gonna wipe everyone out. It's like, it keeps up this presence. Like, I don't, and she doesn't believe either of them. It all seems very performative. And then you learn what happened. It's just so beautifully tragic. And as John does these images, he has selected a very, very important black and white shot that comes up at the end of the movie. Basically, it doesn't spoil
the whole film in black and white.
No, the whole film is color.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the black and white shot is just okay. What happens at the start of the movie is you see a photograph being taken by an American who runs over and wants to cover the line, and as they get over there, a hat falls over the line to the North Korean side, and it's like, oh god, what's going to happen? All the South Korean soldiers load their guns, get ready, and the soldier just dusts off the hat and hands it back over the border.
Right.
And it's a moment of tension. But one of the photographers wants to get a picture of it, and this is the picture they get. And it's like, oh, it's just a thing. We see it from literally top down, so you can see the two sides of the border. But at the end of the movie, it pans across, and all the key components are there the whole time. It's like, oh, this is masterful. Now, it doesn't spoil stuff for you in the story, but it has such a weight to it. So anyway, what are the numbers, Jack? Because I know you haven't seen this one.
I have not seen it, but it's got 88% on the Tomatometer with a 91% audience score.
I'll tell you why it's ranked down a little bit. There's
ranked
a lot of
down
stuff...
at 88%. Yeah, exactly.
Yes, exactly. There's a lot of stuff in the English language that's
Rubbish.
just shit, and it's just because it's not a first language. The Swiss, side of things, where they're explaining, you must make sure you adjudicate this all very neutrally, and then you got kind of saying, so you want me to ask why you should? And it's like, oh fuck, this is bad. And it's not just that it's a performance in another language, it's just written really weirdly. It's like nobody talks like that, but that's the nature of when you get a thing in a different language, and it's translation issues. That's part of it, but that can be really jarring for a lot of people. They're like, this is fucking dumb. It's like, no, it's not. Crack on, watch this movie. So I am in trouble because I'm not sure which way I'm going to vote even now. This is the same thing.
I haven't seen JSA, so I can't vote.
So on the top corners, we have two clear winners. Bottom corners, two difficult things. Should we go with Tim first and see if that makes it any easier?
Yes, please do.
Tim, what did you say? Tim said JSA is better than Thirst.
Okay.
Yeah, Tim's not wrong.
There we go.
I knew I'd be going to. I love Thirst. I think it's so good, but JSA is a very, for lack of a better word, on this list, it might be the most important one. Okay, I'll push it on.
That's a bold claim, Matthew.
It really is, because it's for a lot of people. Even now, there's like South Korean dramas on Netflix and stuff. Crash Landing on You, for example, is about this heiress from South Korea who accidentally parachutes into North Korea, and she references this movie as well because it's so much a part of the consciousness, and it's wonderfully tragic and awful. Anyway, so we now have a better look at things. I'd like to say it's going to get easier from here, but I don't know if it is. Shall we? Okay, we don't need to work. But we've covered everything now, so we're just going to go straight into our stuff.
Yep.
So here we go. Old Boy versus Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance.
I'm not saying it's an easy one for me, but I have,
isn't it?
Yeah. As much as I like Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance, and as we talked about a little bit more than it seems a lot of people do on Rotten Tomatoes and stuff like that, Old Boy's one of the best films I've ever seen. It's got to be Old Boy.
You can't deny that. Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance is thoroughly enjoyable. Old Boy is the most movie at that point.
Yeah.
It is of all the ideas going on in all of them, while they're better executed in Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance, the visuals, the striking performance, everything in Old Boy is just a bit better. And I'm sorry, but there it goes.
Yep, just facts.
Shit.
Yeah.
So Handmaid and JSA, and Jack hasn't seen JSA.
Correct.
So,
just a quick comment from Canis Rufus here,
yes,
who joined us a little bit late. All I know about Old Boy is what I've heard on Sequelisers. Go and watch it, Canis. I highly recommend it.
Watch it and
prepare yourself.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Prepare yourself for an evening of misery. That's the thing. I
carve out an evening. Get a few of like your favorite snacks and favorite drinks, alcoholic or non-alcoholic. Make sure you've got some some comfort food there. At least before you get to the octopus scene, because you ain't gonna be wanting to eat after that.
Don't eat dumplings.
Yes.
You're
Yes.
sick of dumplings.
Yeah.
Okay. So I wouldn't have a problem with any of these going through to the finale, and I wouldn't have a problem with any of these three winning the best film.
I was gonna say, would you say these are the top three for you personally?
Hands down.
Interesting.
Absolutely.
I need to see JSA then, by the sounds of it.
Oh, this is the way. This is when you know you're on something special as a creative, and I hope other people have a similar feeling. When you have something you love, whether it's a song, an album, a comic, a piece of artwork, a film, TV series, and somebody says, "Wow, I probably should check that out," and you have that swelling in your chest, like, "Oh, they're gonna have a great, oh yes," and you vicariously feel good for them.
I'm jealous you get to experience that for the first time. So,
exactly.
Yeah.
And I'm terrified of that because I'm always like, why do I hype these things up? They're always going to be disappointed.
Well,
I don't.
You did that for The Handmaiden for me, and it lived up to the hype. So
I don't think you can be disappointed with Park Chan-Wook films, and you can be surprised and go, oh yeah, not what I expected, but never disappointed if you know what your eyes open. Right. So Tim has given us a sort of an algorithmic rule breaker, shall we say, that says this, if it comes to this sort of thing, which I won't utilize just yet because I don't think I have to. I think we'll just go with without being overbearing. What I say goes in this particular showdown. I don't think anybody would have any problem with this. I think Tim would also probably say the same thing.
Yep.
I think JSA is what launched the career for Park Chan-Wook, really, but The Handmaiden is thoroughly and currently his crowning jewel. It is, I can't stress this enough, flawless. So The Handmaiden has to go to the final. I was thinking, yeah, okay. I don't, and I'm very biased, but I'm not. Right, so this is what I kind of expected the end to be, if I'm honest with you. This was always going to be...
That's what I predicted earlier on, yeah.
Yeah. And now we're here. I'm not sure what's going to happen. I think this comes down to biases.
How so?
Well, from my perspective, because I haven't made my mind up yet. I bang on about The Handmaiden a lot.
You do. That's why I ended up watching it.
But I do that with the mindset of it's a 5-year-old film, and for the last 5 years, I've still heralded it as a great, great piece of cinema. Old Boy has been a great, great piece of cinema for nearly 20 years, and that longevity goes a long way. It's like, you do realize you never fell out of favor with that movie. You never turned around and said, well, actually, now I think about it, there was these problems. It's like, no, it's still fucking fantastic. So it's not just I'm like, well, this is clearly the best one. It's like, no. This has, but then to be, again, for me to rang on about a film for 5 years, that earns a lot of credit. Yeah. So I'm very torn. So we'll let you go first, Jack.
I prefer Old Boy. I think Handmaiden is incredible. I'm not saying I'm prudish. It might be a bit too horny.
It is extremely excessive in what it does.
But Old Boy is harrowing and unpleasant to watch, more so than The Handmaiden.
Yeah.
But Old Boy is a film I have recommended to so many people over the last decade or so. And every time I try and describe it to them, they are captivated by the description. Just describing what happens for bad or good, for negative and positive, for better or worse. They're like, what? I'm like, yeah, so he's imprisoned for some reason. You're like, what do you mean for some reason? He's imprisoned for like 15, 20 years. It doesn't matter. What do you mean it doesn't matter? That sounds like it matters. It doesn't matter. Anyway, you know that bit in Daredevil, right? That's like the best bit of the whole Daredevil show. It's like that, but better with a hammer. Like, okay, cool. And he eats an octopus. Like, what do you mean he eats an octopus? No. He eats an entire living octopus. I'm like, well, they faked that, right? No. No, they did not. And
Traumatizing to watch.
to be fair, that is something as a lifelong vegetarian, and I would like to think of a kind of a bit of an animal activist and kind of pro animal rights and all that kind of stuff. I'm not okay with that. That is upsetting to me, the fact that they actually did that to a real octopus.
Mm.
But that scene has haunted me ever since for that exact reason, and it's hard to escape that fact.
Mm.
And there are scenes in this film that haunt me to this day, and it has to be my pick.
No, that makes complete sense. I utterly understand that. As I said before, the premise of Old Boy is so easy to describe and so enticing, and it's again for 2003, it looks ahead of its time. It doesn't like what
It does. It does. It's aged well.
Yeah, entirely. To the degree that I think I mentioned earlier about the Wong Kar-wai film Fallen Angels, which looks like it's from like mid 2000s, might be 1995. Old Boy exists just in its own right. This weird neon, high contrast sort of world. It's like, what is this? And so many people have tried to imitate it. I mean, Spike Lee literally tried to imitate it with a terrible live-action US remake. I say live-action, but you know what I mean. With Josh Brolin and Elizabeth Olsen, and it was not good. It was. I mean, I get like Spike Lee, like I really loved it and wanted to say, "Oh, I want to do that myself." And like, yeah, but don't.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, you pick him out. Or what did Tim say? Should we go Tim first?
We'll go me first and see if Tim.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. If it comes to a tie, I've got to say The Handmaiden.
Fair enough.
I absolutely agree with everything Jack has said, and for the very fact that I can't recommend The Handmaiden to certain people because it's just too horny, and the fact that The Handmaiden is so intricately woven, I can't even tell you much of the story. And that's about a young girl who's a bit of a thief who wants to go and con a rich lady. It's like, right, she goes to live with her, and then they start having like sexy times. And it's like, okay, well, what happens? I can't tell you.
Just watch it. Watch the rest of it.
You think it's good? It's one of the best films ever made. It's like, all right, okay, fine. It's hard to sell that way, but it is to see. I think just like watch a trailer that doesn't give away too much, and even then it's like, well, I guess it's pretty cool. It looks like it's very nice with production design, but The Handmaiden is my pick. So it's over to Tim. Tim gave us his algorithmic sort of thing of like what happens in a tie break sort of thing, and he wrote one thing only. He wrote Handmaiden for the win.
Hey, there we go. It's official.
Because Horny Tim's gonna go where Horny Tim's gonna go.
He's got his own emoji for a reason.
Yeah. But again, I'm not gonna lie. There are so many of these movies that if they'd end up in the top two, even one, I'd be like, yeah, fair cop. If Old Boy had won this, or I decided to go, I'd be like, yep, no problem at all with that.
Absolutely.
Same with JSA. I'd say if Thirst won this, I'd be like, that's interesting, but yeah, I can see it. You can argue that point quite easily with these movies. Just zoom out for everybody to have a look. I'm going to take a little screenshot.
There's the full. I'll give you the full screen. Hold on, full screen. There you go.
Yeah,
beautiful.
But depending on what kind of mood you're in,
congratulations, Handmaiden.
Good. They're all standalone. They're all great.
Yep. They're all fantastic.
One's a trilogy. They're disconnected. So never about watching them in order and like that's all.
Yep. Yep. But they all kind of, like you said, peripherally reference each other, but you can watch them all in isolation very nicely. So that wraps up our June monthly live stream. Thank you very much, lovely patrons, for joining us live. Thank you very much for viewing us on YouTube after the fact as well. Congratulations to The Handmaiden. I'm sure Park Chan-Wook is very excited to find that The Handmaiden has won. We'll let him know personally, and I'm sure
all the credit it received.
I'm sure he'll be elated.
Relevance next to this high honor, this prestige.
Exactly. But yes, thank you very much for joining, everybody. We really appreciate it, and we'll be back next month with another director showdown, and we'll be teasing that very, very soon. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Goodbye.